Well, good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening, Smite fans. Welcome on in. We have SCC right after your SPL. There's a nice little palate cleanser here. Athenian Sages and Xibalba Storm. Two teams, Kaizo, who, honestly, 3 weeks in, have yet to find a win. But the good news is for these teams, one of them is finally putting a win in that W column.
That is true, Blur. There is no outcome where both of these teams walk away from here without getting a win in this week. It has to be at least one of them, and for who that's going to be, I think that your guess is probably as good as mine. I do think that these are two teams that, based on the performance that we've seen, unfortunately, I think that their position in the standings is pretty reflective of that. So I do think that despite the fact that they're both at the bottom, I think that these are two teams that are very well matched for this particular matchup.
Well, speaking about those matchups and things, we'll go ahead and jump straight on in towards picks and bans between these two teams. And honestly, over the last sort of 4 weeks, we've seen a lot of new gods sort of come in swathes as this meta's changed. I mean, most recent one comes to my mind is Awelish. We literally just watched Adapting pick up this Awelish kind of pick and run it through, but we've seen that as well strip down into the SCC. So are there any kind of major changes you think are coming in for week 4's picks and bans?
I wouldn't say that specific to this week. I'm anticipating a whole lot of different changes. I do agree that there are some things that are certainly sifting their way down. Like, it did take a little bit for things like the Assassin mids to make their way down to the SCC levels of play and then below. So it usually tends to be that sort of trickle-down effect where we see something have a ton of success in the SPL, other teams start to experiment with it, and then gradually over time, we see those adaptations take place. Excuse me. As for specifically the Awelish, I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a flavor of the month kind of thing. I think it's just very good into specifically Yemoja and obviously a whole bunch of other characters with leaps. So it very unlikely, I would say. I'm going to stake my claim here that we see Awelish today, but is certainly still on the table. I mean, as long as it's an aggressive jungler, I think that it pretty much fits in with what we've got going on here.
All right, well, we've already got some fairly standard bans, especially the Xibalba Storm side of things. The Chernobog, the Freya, Athena, all totally fine to go ahead and take those off the table. But it does mean the Sages get themselves a first pick Camazotz here. And this god in the jungle, stop me if you've heard this before, is very good.
I'll stop you there then, because I have heard that before. This Camazotz is one of the premier junglers right now. It has a little bit of flexibility as a solo laner, but probably if you're putting it anywhere that is not the jungle, it's going to be a mid lane pick more often than not. It is kind of the twin brother of the Pele mid. It's sort of it works very well in the jungle, and then if you want it in the mid lane instead, you could take it there. That actually kind of bridges pretty nicely to what the Storm pick up here with the first 2 slots. The Set is a character that we've seen it in jungle and then kind of fell out of favor, saw it in solo for a while, fell out of favor, and now it's back again as, believe it or not, one of our premier mid laners in the competitive scene. So it's a very interesting kind of matchup here where both of these assassins could be mid laners. I think that Set more likely than Camazotz to be a mid laner, but not necessarily tilting the hand and showing all the cards just yet.
Agreed. Even the Sages doing something similar here. They've gone ahead and picked up a Raijin and a Thor. And the weird thing is my brain has now been so addled by this meta. I'm going, I wonder which of these two is the solo laner. And that's just the worst feeling ever. But you go to someone when Raijin first comes out and said, hey, this is a solo lane matchup here. Don't worry about the gods that don't exist yet, but Raijin's going to be played in the solo lane and work really well tanky. You're looking absolutely insane here. But Sage has got themselves a really nice top 3. Meanwhile, the Storm, honestly, like the Set, the Pele, these are absolutely insane gods. And Sol, she certainly seems to be a flavor of the weak kind of pick right now.
Yeah, what a world we live in where you just don't pick tanks anymore. Like in the top 3, it used to be you pick at least one backliner and at least one frontliner in the top 3, and then you fill out your draft from there once you have a little bit of indication of what picks you're going for, where they're going. But now both Sages and the Storm have drafted characters that you cannot completely certainly tell me where each of these 6 characters are going to be going. I think that Thor is undervalued in 3 different roles right now. I think it's a very good solo laner, it's a fine jungler, and it's an undervalued support. Raijin is one of the premier mid laners and also being a little bit on the rise as a solo lane stock. And then Camazotz could do jungle, could do solo, could do mid. There's so much flexibility with what the Sages have here. Just picking these 3 characters somehow, Blur, tells you nothing at all about what they're actually planning to do.
Agreed. Even as you can see in the ban sides of things, both these 2 teams looking more towards the assured things. Let's get rid of some Guardians off the table, but surprisingly enough, Ganesha was left on the table. Terra, Kuzenbo taken out, even Cerberus, but Storm go ahead and grab themselves a Ganesha. Finally, we have 2 picks. We actually know where they're going in the Ram and Ganesh, so that is nice. Now Sage is looking for what is likely going to be their support. You're shaking your head here because that is a Charon. And honestly, I kind of agree with you. I don't see what this Charon is bringing that the Sages needed.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. I wasn't shaking my head at the Charon. I was just hoping that...
Really?
Yeah, I think Charon is great. I think that he's actually as good as people think. There's a lot of talk right now that maybe he's overhyped, but I think he is exactly the right amount of hyped as a character. I'm just looking at their bottom 2, and I was really hoping for something that tells me where the other 3 characters are going somehow, and I still just didn't get that. Like, they just picked a duo lane and said, all right, well, the rest of the 3 will go somewhere, so we'll figure it out. At least the Storm have told us where their picks are going. It's going to be Soul ADC, it's going to be Set in the mid lane more than likely, and Pele in the jungle more than likely. But even then, Blur, I have to put the caveat on the end, because we're still not completely certain of that either.
Agreed. So instead of just making the guesses, we'll go ahead, jump on into game, find where these picks are going to be played. Game 1 between the Sages and the Storm coming your way. And it is going to be a Thor solo. And it's... Wait, hang on, this is a Raijin mid. What's going on here? That's not possible.
This guy picked a tank and he put it in the mid lane. What is this guy doing? He's trolling or something.
Bro, no, I mean, hey, you say that. Guardian mids were kind of fun. Like, if you haven't played, like,
Atlas
a Ymir or Cabrakan mid...
Terra mid, back when she had that interaction with the 2 where you could dash her and it did a whole bunch of damage. Shout out Q and Angry, by the way. That was some of the most fun that we've had in playing damage supports. But fortunately, Blur, we're not doing the damage supports here. We're doing the damage just about everywhere else. And it's going to be Snaddy on his signature Thor pick, which... if I had to put money on it, would have probably guessed this would be the alignment that both of these teams are going for. And it does mean that Nayhoo's going to be piloting an actual real live mage in the mid lane, which we unfortunately, Blur, don't get to see a whole lot of these days.
We certainly don't, but Xibalba Storm have a decent answer in it. We've seen a little bit of time. The idea of this Pele being sort of the I'm going to dive your mid laner has been kind of their premier playstyle, so hopefully Nayhoo and Grave are keeping on top of that. Meanwhile, Snaddy just peeking around at the health bar. Snaddy getting very low over in the solo side as King Arthur makes their way back. They seem to have pretty much fallen off the map for a while, but hold that a sec. Mid lane gets a bit aggressive. Ratmilk blinks in, puts Nayhoo to about half.
Nayhoo is going to live there, uses actually the Aegis there, and jumps in on Globe. Damage is going to be good there, Blur. Nayhoo will answer back and take that first blood. It's not every day that you get to say somebody goes Aegis first relic instead of beads, but when you're against something hyper-aggressive like Ratmilk and Globe on Pele set, there's not a whole lot to beads there. I mean, you could argue a knock-up from Ratmilk could be a problem, but why not just Aegis then? Because that's when all the burst damage is going to be coming out anyway. You might as well try to negate some of that damage. And that little interaction actually tells you a lot about the way that these picks function, because Pele can play very aggressively level 2, but Set can't.
And talking about going aggressively, Grave is also doing that, and got the follow-up. That seems to be the thing. Wherever Graves is going, the rest of the Sages are following it up, because that was started off as kind of Grave and Globe were just kind of trading basics, and then Nayhoo goes, oh wait, hang on, I'm on an aggressive mid laner. So they just kept on pushing forward, but First Blood going the way of the Athenian Sages here, find themselves up about 600 gold in their favor. Snaddy, though, certainly not been having a fun time. We've been seeing Tegveer has just been constantly face mashing them right now.
Yeah, Tegveer gets the better end of this matchup for Realistically, the foreseeable future, I mean, we're talking Snaddy needs a full item in order to be able to comfortably clear this wave, and that is kind of the bane of Thor early game, is you don't have the ability to clear wave very well, you do very good damage, but you're susceptible to something like a King Arthur building a first item breastplate and then just walking you down. It's really the rotation potential that gives you a lot of value from this pick, not so much your ability to function in the hyper early game before level 5.
Well, an attempted invade from Xibalba Storm over on the left side. Sure, Shinigami and Hapn happen to find themselves a little too early. They try to take the fight, but DonutDoug and Hámmy were able to put out a lot of damage. Shinigami got very low in there. Will be able to sustain back up with that first ability, and it does seem like at least Xibalba Storm, they have a bit of a game plan here, but in terms of what they're looking for, this comp to me feels very early tilted. Is that going to be a problem for them?
I would actually argue that their composition thrives in the late game, because they have the magical ADC, which usually comes online in the late game, and then Globe, not specific to the character necessarily, but specific to the build path, is going to be itemizing much more toward the level 20 full build era.
Okay.
That's why you've got this Sigil of the Old Guard, which is what he's going to end up upgrading this one into, giving him a ton of protections and a ton of mitigations, making him very difficult to deal with once that build is full, but up until that point, it's not the best starter item for being able to play aggressively. I mean, it gives you a very small amount of protection, some sustain, but usually you want your starter item to help you get through the early game. Do things like sustain up, allow you to clear camps effectively, make you clear the mid waves that you can rotate out and start to look aggressively. Sigil doesn't really do that. It's a much slower starter item, so because of that reason, I think it's much more late game.
Well, we'll see whether or not Xibalba Storm do fight some early. We did see Globe go on in aggressively. Didn't pop the ult, held that, knowing the Grave had the potential to leap away. So I like that from them. But we do see first items starting to come online. A lot of stacking items. Thebes, Gauntlet of Thebes coming online. You've got your Transcendence, Book of Thoth, even the Soul Eaters and Devourer's Gauntlet. So it does seem like both of these two teams are gearing themselves up towards the late game. And then I guess since I asked you about Xibalba Storm, Athenian Sages, are they happy for this game to go late?
They're not too bothered by it. If it does, I think their composition scales just fine, but probably around 15 to 18 or levels into the game is probably where they get their strongest point, but Ratmilk looking for a gank won't be able to get it. Very aware is this duo lane. They're actually going to have to fight over the shield buff blur.
They might, but instead Grave just walks away. You could be wrong. I mean, hey, look, we're one for one on being wrong at this point. As hello, Anvil of Dawn comes on in. Tegveer not able to steal away the buff. That does get secured by Snaddy, but it costs the ult in doing so. That does also show as well, Snaddy now, first item finished off, and it is the Rune Forge. This one's been quite popular recently. Walk me through this item. Where has it suddenly found its appeal?
It's just great sustain. Like the base stats on this item, you can see it gives you some health, but more critically, it gives you health and mana sustain. It's power to clear the wave, which Thor definitely needs in the early game until you get some more levels into that hammer. And then it just functions incredibly well with something like a Thor ult combo where you're landing on somebody, then dumping a whole bunch of damage on the specific location that the initial CC occurred at. It's much better on somebody like Thor than it is on like Hercules, for example, where your CC ends up being a push that removes people from the rune-forged field. Instead, on Thor, you land on them, you drop that field, and they're taking more damage, you're taking less damage. It also gives you a very good glyph. That rune-breaking hammer is one that has risen to prominence here, because it just denies so much damage, makes you take so much more. It's a baby Sunder every time you get CC'd.
It's a pretty good look right now as Tegveer really trying to show just what King Arthur loves to do, and that is with some CDR. They are...
Nayhoo, you good, buddy?
Fat finger? That'd be my guess. FF on that one. Bit unfortunate, but hopefully it's not punished too hard as Ratmilk joins up with the support, and they're going to look to try and take down the ult. Comes through, and that's good enough. Hámmy will take a spill. Credit to Ratmilk to do so. It costs them all 3 ults, and now Doug is looking to answer it back. 2 shots, needs the last one, gets it, but it's not enough damage. Shiπigami lives on under 100 HP.
RIP, my boy DonutDoug lands all 3 shots and still doesn't quite get the kill on Shinigami. Man, these players with their name changes, man. Pringles was such a good name, and he's got to go to Shinigami and just mess with me. Same thing, I'm calling you out too, Tegveer. What happened to God Age? What happened to that name? We were just talking about before the broadcast. It's all of these name changes, just every single week, just mess with me because I know them by different names. But unfortunately, though, DonutDoug lands all the shots, no name change for him, but just not enough damage to land that kill. And actually, GIobe, I was gonna say was looking to play aggressively on Nayhoo, but ends up backing up. And Snaddy's gonna need some help over here, man.
Oh, he's definitely going to need to because his teleport's down from the Mjolnir's attunement. And now Ratmilk's over here as well. Keep an eye on Hámmy. They're making a rotation as well. But with Bad Out of Hell, it's enough to push him off. In fact, Snaddy actually comes back in on the Apple of Dawn and picks up a kill on Tegveer.
And that's the power of this Thor. It is not a laning phase character. You're not necessarily looking for the solo kills with this god. You're probably going to get pushed into your tower more often than not. But by gosh, by golly, Blur, Anvil of Dawn is an incredible tool to kill anybody that doesn't have CC immunity. And wouldn't you know it, Tegveer on this King Arthur, as do most solo laners, go for this teleport first instead, means that it's a very bad time if they get CC chained.
Oh, dog. Good head on a swivel there. Happens to spot out Hapn. Unfortunately, Shinigami is now doing the buff. Solar Flare comes out. Supernova. One of the 2 sun-based things, but they do grab the buff. Don't pick it up, but Shinigami is able to get themselves just a little bit more farm here against the Athenian Sages duo lane. Hapn's still sticking around on this duo side. Hámmy has started to make the rotations. Should Hapn be sticking in this lane, or do they really need to start letting them solo farm?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is just, if you've watched any high-level Smite recently, you've probably seen this one time or another. It's a very aggressive ADC, and then you just sit a support in that lane, and you farm up every single camp that walks in front of you until the end of time. If Hapn rotates early, that means that Shinigami loses value from some of the pressure. That's why you pick something like a Soul, a Freya, an Olorun, these things with very high early pressure. You want to play around those shield buffs, look for purple invades, maybe a back camp invade, and then transition that prominence around the duo side of the map to some kind of early Gold Fury and snowball out of the duo lane side of the map. If Hapn just walks mid and allows Shinigami to 1v1 DonutDoug, that throws a lot more variance into the mix. If Doug steals away a couple of those buffs, gets a good gank off, gets a rotation from Hámmy at an undue time, that immediately throws away all of the lead that Shinigami had, throws away all the pressure that they had in that lane. So the fact that Hapn is over here is pretty indicative of the fact that they're very much intending to play around DonutDoug and ensure that he gets a little bit behind, but I say that, Blur, he's doing an excellent job of sticking pretty close to where his lane opposition is.
He's been doing a good job, and now with a little bit of support, we're going to see a big 3v3 blink on forward by Ratmilk, straight on into DonutDoug. The pillar's just off the marks, but now the snipes just trying to buy as much time as they can. The Supernova dodged out and turned, as is the Volcanic Lightning, but still Pyroclast picks them up. Shinigami also finds Hámmy. Bad Out of Hell will not be able to close the distance. Instead, Graves says, I would rather lose 2-0 than 3-0.
Yeah, Grave thought about it going in there for the kill onto Ratmilk. It wouldn't have been the end of the world because Ratmilk is 2-0-1 here. Would have at least given some good shutdown gold, but probably for the better that he elects to instead play a little bit safer there, just back up and take the loss, essentially, because that's really what that fight was. They rotate over first. They had the 2v3 for a very brief window of time, and then Ratmilk on the re-engage was just stronger than the initial engagement that Grave could put out there. That's just the difference in burst damage that these two characters have at this stage of the game. The Camazotz scales incredibly well. It's like something crazy, like 130 or 140% scaling on vampire bats, but unfortunately at this stage of the game, you don't have a whole lot of power to put behind that. So something like a Pele with actual relevant CC in the form of that knockup that had to be beadsed out by DonutDoug, and then the follow-up slow, which actually got the kill and wasn't needed, just unfortunately is not going to be enough to bring one down in that situation. And instead, you're just going to have to take the loss there. Grave is not a character that can just put out the same amount of damage, put out the same pressure as Ratmilk can right now. So it was worth at least trying to rotate over and shut down Shinigami, but now things went from bad to worse because you only put Shinigami further ahead with that rotation.
Not to mention as well, Grave ends up slightly now behind to Xibalba Storm. And you mentioned that the Xibalba Storm want to play around this left-hand side. Gold Fury is up at this point in time. 12 and a half minutes in. This is usually the time when either a caster will start asking, hey, are we going to be seeing Gold Fury soon? Or a team starts going over there. And I'm of this mind that Xibalba Storm, I mean, look at Shinigami's build. Demonic Grip is the second choice. That's not one we're usually seeing this early on. It's usually sort of the Hastened Ring or maybe even just the Cyclopean. But this to me screams they want to just get it to an objective and shred it down.
I do think that Soul in particular isn't one to typically build the Hasten Ring. Demonic Grip is pretty common actually in this slot, but you're absolutely right, Blair. The reason that you build it is not just for the percent penetration on gods. It's to enable you to open the door on some of these objectives. It used to be almost completely even in the dual lane, but now after that fiasco in the left lane, Shinigami's up about a level and a half, maybe call it 2 levels on a good day over DonutDoug. And if they get one good rotation, I'm talking Tegveer comes up unexpectedly, or a good pick could open it up.
Oh no, Hámmy so low, summons the sticks, but it's nothing more than a wash for the rest of Xibalba Storm. They're used to that kind of weather. These 4 members now find a clean pick. Grave is TKO'd from this. They're going to go straight on towards the Gold Fury. And look how quickly that thing is melting. They go ahead and grab that before Nayhoo can even show up. And they'll go ahead and set themselves up a very nice 4,000 gold lead. Oh, Snaddy's actually made a rotation as well. Doesn't use the ultimate, instead just come on over. Now we'll go for the ult on a potential re-engage, but there is no one from Xibalba Storm doing it. I like the attempt of maybe Xibalba Storm stick around, but they are more than comfortable enough saying, we got to win, let's just back it up. But say that, look at the fighting over on the left side. Doug's now getting 2v1'd against the Soul. The knockup is there, and the damage is good. Ratmilk adds another kill to their count.
R.I.P. the Baker, man. He just wanted to get one shield buff this game, and unfortunately, Ratmilk is not going to allow that to happen. So, once again, Blur, things go from bad to worse. You try to shut down this Soul with that big rotation to the left lane, and that was the only foot in the door that the Xibalba Storm needed to break this game wide open. What was an even matchup in the dual lane is now 2.5, maybe 3 levels even in favor of Shinigami. They get the Gold Fury there, and I'm surprised that the Athenian Sages don't use any of their resources to try to take that one away from them. As you saw, DonutDoug stepped up, Nayhoo stepped up. Both of them had the ults available, and yet neither one of them thought that it was worthwhile to attempt to invest either of those cooldowns, maybe try to steal that objective away. Would have liked them to at least throw one or the other out. I mean, DonutDoug is on...
Oh no. Guys, should we just suggest that you rebind your relic keys? Because I don't even know what button DonutDoug could have pressed there to try and grab that one. You go ahead, break some stuff down whilst I have a breakdown over this.
I'm the one breaking down. I was in the middle of saying I don't even know what. Something about, DonutDoug, his ult's pretty good at stealing Gold Fear. I think that was going to be the extent of that analysis, but Snaddy's going to have to analyze an escape route here because he's getting cut off here from Ratmilk.
Oh, what a beautiful positioning there. Ratmilk round the corner, immunes out the tectonic rift with the volcanic lightning, surges through, as Shipigami has made a rotation all the way over to the solo side of the map. Only thing that's up here is Fire Giant right now. Is DonutDoug just not that interesting anymore for Shippigami?
I guess, man, he doesn't taste good or something, because it is no longer the epitome of Shinigami's attention. Instead, it's going to be DonutDoug actually pushing up left while Shinigami's on right. It is worth noting that you cannot do Fire Giant at this stage of the game with just a King Arthur and a Soul, so they do at least get the pick onto Snaddy and the tower and right, which is a pretty good return on investment there, but it allows DonutDoug a little bit of space to farm. And that is what the Sages are really looking for here, is they want to slow down the momentum of the Xibalba Storm and try to get Doug some solo farm. If he can get caught up, if he can get that Kinsai online, maybe start building into an additional attack speed item, he might be able to rotate and make a meaningful impact on these fights, but at least for the time being, you're going to want to keep him over there, keep him farming, and at least try to keep him happy or make him happy for the first time, Blur, because it has not been great for him so far.
Well, there it is. There's the kin size picked up and working towards the Morning Star. Most likely. I mean, there's no way you'd go for a Heartseeker. Hydras, maybe, if you're going to be Hydrogen with the crypt build.
God,
so
that'd be sick.
pretty
I hope he
sure
does
that it's. Yeah, roll in, immediately proc Hydras with a little bit of crit. Why are we not seeing that right now?
Take notes.
Yeah. Take notes. I'm the one suggested it. You're supposed to be the one who disproves it or proves it.
Oh no,
You're
I was
saying
telling
I'm smart
Doug to take notes. I mean, this guy very clearly, he's got some issues with his gameplay, man. He's 0-2. You're not even in this game, so you could never be 0-2 right now, Blur.
That's
you're
true.
Already
That's
better than DonutDoug. So Doug, I know you're watching.
Wow.
Write this one down. Hydra's Lament might be the play here if you get behind on the soul.
I mean, hey, look, there was a time when you used to build Transcendence ROM, you'd give him the red buff at level 1. It was insane, the old Ataraxia build from back then, but we'll reminisce about the past after this Oni Fury is taken away by the Xibalba Storm.
No, man.
Attempted there from the Athenian Sages to grab it, but they just can't hold it. Now Ratmilk is 1v3 charging forward, realizes, hey, the rest of my team got distracted, and ends up paying the price for it. Nayhoo falls, as does Grave to Shippigami. It's a 2-for-1, but a stolen Oni Fury.
Yeah, that's a killer there for the Sages because they found at least some window to try to make an aggressive play, and that's the correct way to play Smite when you're behind. I think that a lot of teams fall into the trap of, well, we're behind, we have to give up everything, but that just gets you more behind, Blur. You have to find one opportunity to stake your claim and try to get back into the game. Sages kind of put their foot down there and try to say, well, if we just let this Oni Fury go, then Soul just rotates to right lane, they do Fire Giant, then things get worse. The Siege is very good for the Storm. So instead, they try to pull the Oni Fury, and they had dominant pit control. I mean, it was only Hapn in there and one or two other members. The Sages were coin flipping that objective, make no mistake about it, and unfortunately came up tails there for them. But they did at least try to make something happen, so credit where it's due to making the right play instead of, you know, the results-based thinking of, oh, well, it didn't work out for them, they lost the Fury. Doesn't matter. Right call, just unfortunately doesn't work out.
It's one of those things where almost you start predicting the entire game and then sort of prophesizing that it's going to happen. We can't fight because we're behind, so they don't fight. So Xibalba Storm win any fights that happen because they're not fighting. And then that means that objectives don't happen because Athenian Sages think they're behind. And oh, look at that. There's a look at that. There's a 10k gold lead and you just lost the game because there is no way that you can just safely farm to late. So
there you go.
I like the call as 20 minutes coming on through. 6,000 gold lead for the Xibalba Storm. Not insurmountable, but not unnoticeable. As another Pyromancer goes the way of Xibalba Storm. It's a clean look from them right now from Xibalba Storm. And you mentioned Athenian Sages want to try and find an opening. They tried it at towards the Oni Fury there. What other options do they have for an opening?
Well, you can try to play around this next Fire Giant, or I guess the first Fire Giant, because Shippigami is about to hit level 20, farming over here in the dual lane, and that's probably going to be a good indication of a time frame where the Xibalba Storm will try to break the game open. I think that once you get one player to level 20, especially something like your ADC, which I've heard it used the expression before that your ADC is your objective fight battery. If your ADC is too low, you can't take objectives. It doesn't matter if everybody else is still healthy. There's a very real chance that you still can't do it if your ADC is low. At which point, Shippigami being the first level 20 on the map alongside his mid laner could be that opening for them to rotate over and do that Fire Giant. And the Sages are going to have to decide, Blur, do we want to try to steal it? Do we want to try to take the fight? Or do we try to give it up and then try to defend on these T2s? I think that last one is probably the worst option for them just because it does allow Shippigami to just walk down these towers and just pretty much sweep them up for free. Soul's in-hand damage is some of the best in the business for bringing down these structures. I think that it's got to be something around this FG. I don't want to see them give this up for free. If they want to try to take the fight and at least win the Fire Giant, that is a good option. But I also think that just going for a steal or even picking one member and then trying to disengage, even if the FG is lost, is also not the worst thing in the world for the Sages. They don't need something transformative here. They don't need to break their way into the game and win off of this next fight. They're just stalling the Xibalba Storm and preventing them from trying to win off of this specific Fire Giant.
Well, they're starting to do that. You can see the Sages have opted to let Doug just solo farm as much as possible. They're on the map right now, and the rest of Xibalba Storm, they are pushing down around this Fire Giant pit. Swathes of damage attempted, but not much lands home. Is now the Xibalba Storm. They've got to make a call here because Doug's going to get this Phoenix. They will be getting compensation for it, but look at this. Grave is splitting the map as well. Xibalba Storm, they don't know quite what they want to do here.
They're going for the engage, though. Here comes the Thor Blur.
It might be big. Where's he going to land it right now? It's into the backline. No one finds a home. Ratmilk takes down Doug, though. It's all gone Peak Tong for the Sages' game plan. Let's see if Xibalba Storm can capitalize on it. Kingslayer has been used, and Snaddy will fall towards that. Now, whether or not the rest of Xibalba Storm could find anything, the answer is no. They will group back up and set up for Fire Giant. Xibalba Storm, I thought it was Athenian Sages trying to call the shots and bait Xibalba Storm into a bad fight. But they just said, all right, then, we'll call your bluff.
They definitely did call the bluff, and, I mean, you called it pretty much as it was. They sent 2 people to split push. It was DonutDoug in left, trying to grab that bird, but unfortunately, they get Ratmilk back in time to defend that. Not only defending the bird, but also bringing down that ADC that was trying to split up the map and try to get a little bit more solo farm. And Grave was splitting the mid lane, which meant that the Xibalba Storm had to pull the trigger on something, whether that was backing up and trying to defend both of those structures, or just all-inning the objective there and trying to go for the fight. It forced the Storm to make a decision at that specific moment. And the Storm decided, we don't care about the Fire Giant, we only want the fight afterward. So the Sages burned the summon sticks. They used the Thor ult as well, trying to take the fight despite the fact that they were 3-5. Because remember, they don't have to win the fight. They just have to eliminate a sufficient number of members that the Xibalba Storm can't get FG on all 5 people. And they tried to do it onto the back line of the Xibalba Storm. Unfortunately, Snaddy a little bit off the mark there with the Thor ult. Raijin goes up into the ult. Nayhoo uses Taiko drums and gets bursted immediately from 100 to 0 while using that animation. Doesn't even get to cancel it and use the Aegis. So it was an opportunity there for the Sages. They set it up how they wanted to. You could tell that was very intentional. There was thought process that went into it, but the Xibalba Storm just responded perfectly to all of that pressure that the Sages put on them.
And it's really impressive as well from the Storm, because the fact that they were able to bait Sages into the fight, thinking that all 5 of them were there, meant Doug kept trying to stick around, who incidentally went back to base with near 3,000 gold, got the full dominance and upgraded starter finished off. Now they've got themselves the Fire Giant do the Xibalba Storm. They've got their own Titan now pushing down over on this right-hand side. I mean, what kind of a better siege could you want than your own Titan helping lead the charge?
And he's going to be the commander here. They might elect to actually just split the map and let him push by himself. Looks like only Tegveer there to hold the Titan's hand. Everybody else grouping up here in the mid lane. Grave is going to have to contend with 3 or 4 different people. They are sacrificing the Titan and right here, Blur, to allow for this push down the mid lane. They're still out of position. They could look to break into the middle bird right now.
And I like this, because they still see 2 of Athenian Sages on the map. Snaddy gets a nice dunk, and it buys him a bit of time, but that bird is already gone. Great work from Hapn to just completely disorientate the fight with the pillars. Unfortunately, though, Athenian Sages just could not get back in time. Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't give up the right side. Like, maybe one person sticks around, but that Titan, like you said, Xibalba Storm sacrificed it to get themselves a Phoenix. That's fantastic for them. And now, Snaddy's around on their own, and he's going to get forced away from the right side.
And the Storm are playing so careful there because, well, hang on, Pele, a little bit no man's land here. Sages look like they want to take this fight, Blur. They're at least stepping up into the tower, but now it's looking bad.
It's looking real bad. Summon Sticks, again, just completely ignored in its impact. Round the back, Graves goes, but Bat Out of Hell is doing quite literally nothing to any of the members. The Great Wall stops the rest of the Xibalba Storm pushing forward, but Athenian Sages started that fight. And Xibalba Storm said, yeah, you're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy.
You're not that guy, bud. And unfortunately, they were right. I mean, the Sages tried to take something there, and I think that it is a worthwhile investment of that opportunity, because if they can manage to kill them off before they can go back and spend up all that gold, that would have been a huge boon for the Sages. You can see 2,300 gold just got spent out there by Hapn. Should be at least as much, if not more, on everybody else for the Xibalba Storm, meaning they were essentially fighting down an item. If they could take that fight there, force the Xibalba Storm to fight on even footing for at least a couple of moments, they get that opportunity before they can spend all the gold, and then it feels like they're fighting into a 5k gold lead versus a 10k gold lead. But because the Storm managed to not only get that middle bird, but also knock down the T2 and right, and get out without having to fight the Sages, that means that they are now up 10k, they've got the middle bird already broken down, and we're planning on this next Fire Giant being the one to end the game for the Xibalba Storm. They don't have to end the game here, keep in mind. They're in a very comfortable position. They don't have to do a whole lot of anything, and the game will eventually just come to them unless the Athenian Sages force them to fight. But because this base is already broken, because middle bird is already down, that means one decisive fight is all the Xibalba Storm need to be able to potentially end this first game and take away one part of their first win of the split, at least.
Could be, but Athenian Sages, they are now at a point, I feel, where they can comfortably fight. A lot of level 20s online. Everyone's caught up pretty much in terms of levels. Only real item disparity. Doug looking for the last item, as is Nayhoo, but Snaddy pretty much in the same situation, forced to bead at the sight of 3, puts themselves at about 70% health. And Xibalba Storm, well, they go back to the Fire Giant. The Sages know this is happening, but look at their map position. It looks like they're just giving this up. Doug's going to try and split push, but they know about it, and Tifa's already there.
Yeah, Tegveer already on the scenery in the left lane, not going to let that bird go down. And I don't mind this call from the Athenian Sages. Giving up the first FG for free would have probably been a bad idea just because the game was fairly close to parity. You were only one fight away at that point from breaking back to even. But now that you're at a point where you're already 10,000 gold down, you've already lost your middle Phoenix, one bad fight, as mentioned previously, could be catastrophic for you. And it's worth noting as well, Blur, because it's a 28-minute Fire Giant, they're not getting the enhanced variant for the Xibalba Storm. By giving that one up, by letting them walk into the pit and take that one for free, they're completely allowing it, yes, but they're preventing them from getting a bigger boon if they were to wait a little bit longer. If the Athenian Sages put up too much resistance there, they might end up giving away an enhanced Fire Giant on the back of a fight, or just outright losing the game off of one engagement around that FG pit. So the fact they give this one up isn't the worst call, but now you do still have to contend with all of the Xibalba Storm with this Fire Giant buff online. Your middle bird is up, which is good for you, but that does mean that somebody has to keep an eye on it at all times.
I thought Graves might be in a little trouble as they may have spotted GIobe, who's trying to push up this mid lane. Last wave of fire minions are pushing in. Xibalba Storm might lose that as a go time. Nice wall from Snaddy. Cuts off a little bit, but Xibalba Storm just need a moment. Keep an eye on when Hapn decides to throw out that ultimate. That's been a big sort of symbol as a go time for a fight. But right now, it's just a slow mounting pressure. GIobe in a little bit of trouble. But again, just buying some time, it seems.
GIobe and Ratmilk both about half HP here. They do have the Fire Giant buff for sustain and a little bit of lifesteal in both of their kits, or at least in Ratmilk's kit, but looks like instead they're going to back up and just reset to base. There is not necessarily a rush for them here because they do have the Fire Giant for quite some time. They do lose out on what was possibly their best opportunity to break the base open again. Once that middle Phoenix respawns, it's going to be slowly healing. GIobe had the last Fire Giant wave alongside him there, but unfortunately for him, the Sages just sent too many people to the mid lane to contend with him, and you're not breaking that bird open 1v3, because Nayhoo being there completely shifts the scales in the favor of the Sages. That could have been the opportunity for the Storm to go in the left lane, but they're playing it very carefully, didn't want to overstep any boundaries, and end up losing out on what could have been a good opportunity. Instead, they're going to capture this beacon and believe, Blur, that this should be the third one, meaning that Titans should be due to spawn at least fairly soon. I say that, but, you know, I was wrong once, I'll be wrong twice.
Yeah, we had that. That was the one where they took the mid Phoenix in that one. So this is the second round. That makes it the fourth one, I think?
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not... I think Xibalba Storm might actually have all 4 of them. I don't believe the Athenian Sages have had one. Someone will tell me if I'm wrong.
Here we go.
But right now, it's all about the fight going through. Shipigami already takes down one. Doug's gone as well. The best kind of defense is a good offense, but there is no way that the Athenian Sages can even begin to put up one. Left side Phoenix falls. Xibalba Storm, they're not going to go ahead and march straight into the base. They will instead retake that mid Phoenix. They want to go ahead, cross every T, dot every I. and make sure that that I spells win.
This
in
is
win.
surgical here from the Storm. They're going to walk into the right bird, but Globe is re-engaging. Nayhoo, no relics.
Not right now. Ratmilk's around the back. They'll find Snaddy. Good immunity, but Tegveer takes down Nayhoo. That's another member of the damage dealers gone. In fact, that's all of them, as is the Phoenixes. But Xibalba Storm, their front line is a little low, so they've got to wait for minions to come on through, but that might just be it. Hámmy being aggressed as is Snaddy, forced back to the fountain, and look how quickly the Titan has fallen. Game 1 to Xibalba Storm.
And I think the best word that I could use here, Blur, for the way that the Storm played that was surgical. I mean, that more often than not, you see a team take some kind of risk and kind of leave a couple of things on the table as they try to convert a small lead into a bigger lead. But that entire time, it didn't really feel like they had anything left on the table. They always pushed when they had the best opportunity. If there was any risk of there being a fight coming back from the opposite direction, they just backed up and looked for a better opportunity, made sure their health bars were full at all times, didn't take fights when they were outnumbered. I mean, once you're behind in the game of Smite, you're looking for a couple of different things. You're looking for a mistake, you're looking for somebody out of position, you're looking for somebody that over-invests into one of these engagements, and the Xibalba Storm didn't do any of that entire time. Playing against a team that doesn't make mistakes when you're already behind makes it feel impossible to get back into the game.
Yeah, it was such a clinical look from them. You saw that there was 3 kills for the Athenian Sages, and it was 3 single pickoffs in this engagement. And it wasn't ever like it was one person constantly out of position. It was a few small picks here and there. But
right.
Looking at this kind of a draft, I'm looking at this going, you gave up Set, you gave up Pele, you gave up Ganesha. Is this something that was over in picks and bans?
I don't think so. I think that they just didn't address the game plan of the Sages particularly well. Because again, the game plan was very clearly you wanted to play around dual lane, put DonutDoug behind, put your ADC ahead, and there wasn't enough pressure coming back in the opposite direction to try to break into some of that rotation. We saw the one fight in left, and that was, ironically enough, what would have been the best opportunity for them to get a foothold in that game. But instead, because they lose that 2-for-0, I mean, that was their one opportunity, it felt like, to get back into the game, and they squandered it, or at least didn't manage to capitalize on it, and therefore the game basically felt over from that point. So going into game 2, I think it's either some kind of additional pressure for DonutDoug, give him something that can fight back into that lane, or plan to play somewhere else, send some more bodies over to that direction. You have a couple of different options here, but it has to start in the duo lane.
Well, the duo lane seems to be the focus of attention in Game 1. Game 2 will be underway shortly, so we'll go ahead and get that set up for you. So now is a good time for you to go and get some hydration, get your posture checked and all that good stuff. We'll be back after this break.
where you will find me. We can change the meaning of home. That's when you remind me what you can say when the lights go out. I can be your guide when you're in the dark. Now take me.
Well, we are back here for game number 2 between the Xibalba Storm and the Athenian Sages. Game number 1 looked pretty handedly in favor of the Xibalba Storm here, Kaizo. And going into picks and bans for game number 2, what do you even look at to try and change? You mentioned the duo lane was a big focus, but like with the bans the way that they were, you let through so many good picks anyway.
Yeah, you can either elect to leave more stuff open and try to take something for your own. I mean, when we had a situation previously where it's like there's 2 or 3 good ADCs, it was pretty common to just leave them all open and take one each, because obviously you're not going to be taking more than one ADC in traditional circumstances. So that's a pretty reasonable approach that you could go for, or just trying to ban all of them out. I mean, I don't even think that I would argue anything else was a big issue for them in that game. It really was just the duo lane. Snaddy was holding his own just fine in solo lane after the initial pressure, but that was just matchup dependent. The mid lane was shockingly quiet for a Raijin versus Set mid lane. It didn't feel like either one of them made a substantial impact on the early landscape of the game. It really did feel like it was only the duo lane that fell apart. So I do think that is where all or the bulk of your attention should be here.
Well, Kaiser, we'll see whether or not your predictions come true. The focus as we go into picks and bans for game number 2 is we want duo lane dominance for either one of these two teams. Sages will go back to first pick. And is there anything specific that you'd want banned away? Because my first thought is Ratmilk came over and helped get Shippigami ahead. But at the same time, let's think about what was banned. There was the Hades was taken away. There was an Achilles who was off the table, which I think is the only one you could really look at here. But is Soul worth a ban, or would it be better to just get rid of Pele?
Achilles is a Tegveer specific ban. That's just his favorite character and probably the one that he's the best at. So I think that keeping that one off the table is not mandatory, but I would say it's going to open the door for additional problems on another phase of the map if you elect to leave that one open, which does mean that it's probably just going to be the Sages trying to leave all of the magical aid. Well, I say that. They take away the soul, which does specifically get rid of the problem from the last game. I don't want to say results-based thinking, but you saw soul was a problem, we take away soul, and then say that everything's fine. But that does still leave Freya open, that leaves Olorun open. I think that you should really be looking to get one or the other. You don't have to pick it here. You can go for something like a Yemoja, you can go for the Camazotz is open as well again, and then pick it in second and third slot. But if they don't try to grab one of these magical ADCs, I do think it's going to be a mistake for them.
I guess that is the call, like Xibalba Storm. There's no way you'd run Freya and Olorun. That just feels like you pocket 2 lanes for a loss without any real luxury of getting to the late game like we mentioned. So Xibalba Storm looking to go ahead and pick up some magical damage nonetheless. Does appear that the Freya is one of them, and the Baba Yaga, and it feels like the same idea with what Globe was looking to do on this set. Different kind of character, but you kind of just want to wait to the middle of a team fight, pop the ult, and go absolute ham.
And we haven't seen a whole lot of Baba recently because she's been doing some nefarious activity with the way that she interacts with some of the items. But now that she's got that, she's like all straightened out, she's back to the straight and narrow here. She can finally be played again in the competitive scene. This character's not any worse than she was. I mean, this is still a top meta mid laner, make no mistake about it. Something comparable to the Raijin or the Set or whatever it may be. It builds the prophetic cloak very well, which keeps her safe against a lot of the heavy dive that most compositions are going to be drafting. And she can still output very meaningful damage, even despite slotting in a defense item in the build. So I think that it's a very, very normal pick for the mid lane, and I think that it's one that Globe's going to have a lot of fun on.
Well, we've now got the Yemoja Olorun combo going through for the Athenian Sages. Great teamfight potential. I am seeing that much, but they just need to find something to be able to do with the rest of the team for it. Some kind of a threat. They do run back the Camazotz, and I don't know. I mean, Grave didn't seem to have the best of showing. Sure, they didn't necessarily die in the game, but they didn't feel super impactful in these team fights.
I do think Kama has one of the better matchups into Baba Yaga, though. She's a character that's traditionally very difficult to dive because she gets those mitigations, she gets the giant shield, and the damage output at her feet, right at melee range, is incredibly high. So it makes it very difficult to dive her as a melee range character, like most assassins. But Camazotz doesn't really have that issue. You just blink in, do as much damage as you can before they go into Home Sweet Home, and then self-banish, avoid all of that damage, and try to finish them off. It is also very good into Freya for much the same reasons, where if you encounter too much heat, you can get on out of there for free. You can just beads or jump over or ult the whoop, and then you still have a situation where Freya is forced to ult because she can't interact, and that's where she gets a lot of her value when it comes to trading with people. So I think that it matches up very well into what the Storm have here, even though it maybe didn't feel like it has as much value in the previous game.
True, as we do see now the second phase of picks and bans coming through. It seems that jungle is being looked at mostly. As we do see, though, we do want to mention Freya will most likely be teaming up with Cerberus for a duo lane, which kind of scares me with how much magical protection there is for the penetration side of things. This Freya is going to be doing basically true damage early on. The Sages answer back. They go ahead and grab themselves Surtr and a Raijin, which if Nayhoo wants to pick the Raijin back, I don't see any problems with it. But Surtr? I don't know how that feels like. Is that meaning that's going jungle? I mean, I haven't seen, last time I saw Surtr in the solo lane was what, when he first came out?
You're going to be seeing a lot more of him here, Blur, because this character is a force to be reckoned with, frankly, in the solo lane. And I just found out today, as looks like Tegveer's going toward that signature Achilles, which was left open. I just found out today that Surtr 1 has 1,000 magical power or magical damage scaling if you can get all those stacks. What is wrong with this game that you can do 1,000 magic damage as a physical character? That feels so wrong to me.
Well, it may feel wrong for you, but that's why you're not on the design team here. But with these two teams designing up their comps and game number 2 already, let's go ahead and get on in. Can Xibalba Storm put themselves into a win? Or will the Athenian Sages take us to game 3? We'll have to find out as we get on through. And I do just want to point out that 1,000 magical scaling on there, that's only if you kill 200 minions with the damage from the dot. You don't just get that. Now that would be insane.
Yeah, but I watched a FineOK video where he got all of the stacks and he was blinking on people and just bopping them on the noggin. Like, I'm talking, I think it was like Bumba's Hammer and Stone of Binding and like all of these Archdruid's Fury. That was the other one. He just blinked in and auto-attacked one time. And we're talking like 1,400 magic damage, 80 true damage, and then additional damage just for being a physical character. If you can get all of the stacks, it's a character that is a force to be reckoned with, as mentioned before. Whoa. But even if you don't get to that point, as Hapn takes a large chunk of his health bar, even if you don't get there, Snaddy still has a whole lot of pressure in the lane. This is a character that clears wave very effectively, high damage output, very relevant CC, and reasonably safe as a solo laner. The ultimate does self-root you for a long period of time, which does leave you vulnerable to things like Achilles execute, for example. But in the event that's not available or Tegveer isn't able to step up for that, it should be a fairly comfortable matchup for Snaddy over in the solo.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that one. You mentioned there are things, there's going to be a lot that's going on if Snaddy can get towards the back of it, but that is a lot of ifs. And last game, we saw the Athenian Sages didn't get the opportunity or luxury to get many full items online, though Snaddy had a fairly decent time. That said, right now, you mentioned dual lane dominance. Athenian Sages, we're watching Hapn first wave that spawns, eats a stun, and then falls to about 30% health. This seems to be the Athenian Sages have answered back quite nicely, but Ratmilk is around because that shield buff has spawned. They're looking for a long flank.
Here
we might just find it here. DonutDoug getting targeted. Good knockback. It's all there. The damage is good so far, but Ratmilk ate way too much damage from the follow-up from Grave, and now they're getting turned around, and they're going to fall for first blood.
The fact that Doug lives through that is criminal. An excellent play there from the Athenian Sages to keep their ADC alive, and even turn around the damage on the guy who came in full HP. mean, everybody else that was at that engagement was missing some health bar, but Ratmilk walked up not only full HP, but with an extra shield on top of all of that. And somehow he gets bursted 100-0 before they can successfully bring down DonutDoug. Excellent target prioritization there from the from the Athenian Sages. And the fact that they managed to land all of the crowd control on the relevant member and simultaneously get all that burst damage while keeping Doug alive means that this is a vastly different game than what we saw in game number 1. Already Doug is so much more comfortable here than he was in the previous one. And getting your Camazotz ahead, I mean, character that can snowball the game away if you're not careful, already a much better start for the Sages.
Got to agree with you there in the Athenian Sages. There's a lot of surprise healing coming through from that duo lane. DonutDoug also having some healing, I believe, as well in the 3, but getting protections, it may have been a big factor in what we saw there now, and you can definitely say Snaddy's having a better time in this lane. Tegveer, second to hit level 5 and getting a bit bullied over in this matchup. Both of these two, though, on a bit of a slap fight. Is this a matchup that you think that the junglers might want to look at investing a rotation to, or are these two just in for a slap fight for 15 minutes?
That's just such a weird question for the current meta, because the answer is usually the junglers need to play around the dual lane side of the map because that's where these magical characters are at. The dual lane is always so volatile with how impactful the shield buff farming can be, and also the fact that they're very vulnerable in the early game. So ordinarily, you would want to say, well, yes, this is where this is where the junglers should be. They need to play around the dual lane. But it is a matchup where Snaddy and Tegveer are just going to be hitting each other until the game ends. Both of them have kill pressure on the other in the 1v1. Both of them have a reason to believe that they could take the 1v1 or potentially convert a gank. I think we're going to see one here.
Stunned, forcing the fatal strike, but it's body blocked now. Tanking up the tower, Graves goes for it. Tegveer needs one more shot, and Grave will answer that one. No need for the Ragnarok in the end. But it does show off a little bit that Ratmilk is going for the rotation. The Grand Joust after the blink is there.
What
a stun gets Grave on out. Beautiful peel. In fact, Grave actually blinks back in.
And they're going to go for the kill onto Ratmilk here. He's 1,
No
he's
way.
0, as Snaddy will convert that. And that's this Surtr, man. That stun is so sneaky. He almost doesn't feel like a character that should have a basically on-demand ranged stun that you can use through a minion wave. But more often than not, you're going to get caught by it, and it's going to be a very, very painful experience. Because already, this is a character that has high burst damage, you're spamming cooldowns. It's tough to contend with, even when you do have an execute.
Well, talking about executing right now, just look at how quickly Hapn's health bar falls there coming through from the Sanctified Fields. No word from Hámmy on using the ultimate there. Just wanted to try and see what they could grab. But Shippigami without ultimate now for the next duration of that time. Graves looking to play aggressively right now. It's 3-0 on the scoreline here for the Athenian Sages. They're finding themselves... This is a very, very different look, because now Shippigami's got themselves caught in a fantastic riptide. They'll even get pulled back in after the beads are gone. And now a double whoop will not save them. The Xibalba Storm are just getting picked apart one by one on the Sages. There will be a rotation through from Globe, though. That does shut down a lot of it. Hapn just about gets away. But even now, the Athenian Sages on retreat are still stealing away farm.
They do manage to come away with a lot there. They get the Freya kill in addition to getting the beads on her as well, which does open up a lot of opportunity on this dual lane side of the map. And Grave did find success over here in the solo lane, but keep in mind, that doesn't mean he has to keep coming over here. With the way that that fight went on left and all the resources that you took away from the Xibalba Storm there, quick look to shift some of that attention back over to the dual lane side of the map, potentially grab one of these early Gold Furies. You're probably waiting at least another couple minutes, unless you can get a very big window. We're talking you kill Shippigami effectively and also somebody else, but they're doing the first one pretty well.
Look at that. Good stun and a good whoop is there, but it's just not enough. DonutDoug takes down Shippigami. And a similar look to game number 1. We've seen these supports sticking around on the dual lane side, and you mentioned it's all just to get one of these two ahead on their aggression. Doug's certainly feeling aggressive this game.
Yeah, this is retribution here for DonutDoug, who basically wasn't allowed to play. He didn't even get to interact in the previous game, but this time around, he is absolutely the big boss on campus. It's going to be on the Xibalba Storm to determine how they want to play this map from behind. They could play around the mid lane, try to get the volatile solo lane matchup, or try to fight in the jungle here. GIobe taking some damage, forced to the home sweet home.
Whoa!
That's a lot of investment from the Sages, but Grave will land the kill eventually. Shocking, the fact that somebody ends up dying after the way that engagement started out. And the Sages are looking like a completely different team here, Blur.
Yeah, they seem to have taken game one as, not, I don't even want to say like it was always a warm-up thing. They seem genuinely upset at how the game went, with how aggressively they are playing into this comp. I mean, they're taking every fight they can get, and even then some. They're looking for more fights every chance they get. But Nayhoo there. Beautiful. That whole thing just comes around. I gotta mention it. It was a taunt back into a Riptide that put GIobe out of position, that forced them to have to go into the home sweet home. Just such a, like, that kill shouldn't happen. But Athenian Sages run with it to the point of saying, no, we can go it. We'll invest that blinking again. Just because, well, they can. It's 6-0 at 8 minutes in, and they're up 3k.
And it's so hard to use beads on something like that. The Raijin ult isn't one, at least at max range, you ever feel like is going to hit you. Because the barrel comes out so slowly from Nayhoo when you're at max range. And you're like, oh, well, that's not going to hit me. I can just keep walking away. But if you get taunted, you're like, oh, well, it's only a very brief moment of taunt and then I can keep walking away. But it's the follow-up CC. That's the big problem there. You never anticipate the Riptide after the fact. And it's after these things add up that it slowly becomes a problem for you. Individually, Riptide or the taunt from the Raijin ult isn't enough to land the kill onto GIobe there, but it's the fact that it's the two micro CCs that feel just so bad to use beads on. I mean, you don't want to beads a Riptide, you don't want to beads one tick of Taiko drums, and GIobe tries to hang on to them there, gets punished for it, and puts the Athenian Sages in very commanding position here. They've got a whole lot of presence on this left-hand side of the map also. If they can get Doug some reset, get him that demonic grip online, maybe look to pressure out this Freya one more time, we could now finally be talking about seeing our first neutral objective that could be a Gold Fury, or at least shoving in one of these towers for them. Could open up this game even more.
You read my mind about asking whether or not we could see a very early Fury here, but as it stands right now, it doesn't look like the Athenian Sages feel too comfortable for it. And Xibalba Storm, they are thinking it's going to happen. Ratmilk has spent a lot of time hanging around this Gold Fury pit the last couple of minutes. Does get pinged on out and spotted on their rotation, so Snaddy will be a little bit more careful over this side of the map. And it's really odd. I mentioned and praised Ratmilk on the last game with how effective they were on Pele. We've not really seen any such thing coming through from the Lancelot here.
It is kind of a byproduct of the state of the map, though, is actually with that back from the Cerberus, looks like the Sages are going to grab this Gold Fury. No one even in the same zip code for the Xibalba Storm, so the Sages will get that one uncontested. And Ratmilk's kind of a byproduct of his surroundings at this point. He went for that gank in left lane. It was a 3v3. They lost the 3v3. And very critically, he died and gave first blood to the enemy jungler. Which means that in a matchup like Camazotz Lancelot, where the Kama can play so aggressively even at neutral, and much less at a head, he can play so much more aggressively. Ratmilk's had all of his farm under contest, hasn't had a winning lane that he can go for an easy gank on. It's very hard to get back into the game when you're behind in the jungle.
My goodness, just look at this. Just the pelting of damage constantly. The Sages are here for a buff, and that was it. They'll take the fight if they get it. Xibalba Storm, they don't even look like they can try and mount any kind of a defense here. And at this point in time, I'm almost concerned to ask, should Tegveer rotate? Because that's just going to mean Snaddy's going to rotate as well.
Tegveer can't even try for a rotation, man. He's 2 levels down already on Snaddy, needs to get those items online, has 0 magical protections in the build so far. I mean, he's got Breastplate of Determination, but that's not going to give him enough to stand up to DonutDoug on the Olorun, who is a higher level than him, Nayhoo, who is 3 levels higher than him. If he rotates out of that solo lane, he is dead on arrival. So that's not an option for him. They need to somehow slow this game down to the point that Tegveer can at least get 1 magic defense item and then maybe consider a rotation. But at least for the time being, he's locked to that lane. He is shackled to that tower until either the map comes to him or the game ends.
Look at like, excuse me, sorry there. Look at the way that Xibalba Storm have. Just look at the recipes. A lot of these require damaging enemies. All three of the Bountiful Boughs barely at half stacked. Even Tegveer here still has not gotten that fully stacked golden gooseberries. And with the first Stygian beacon going the way in a matter of seconds, like Athenian Sages show up, Storm look at it longingly and can't do anything. As Tegveer's just getting run at again, just constantly under tower. Snaddy is having a very fun time in solo lane.
Yeah, hit him on the head, Snaddy, for no reason. Actually, there's a very good reason coming. The rest of the Athenian Sages come out of the trees, start speaking Vietnamese, and bring down the solo laner from the Xibalba Storm. That is wild, the way that he ended up dying there, because that looked like a very normal solo lane interaction. It looked like Tegveer was just going to back up there. Snaddy's just being weird, getting stacks on his passive. But then very suddenly, 3 more people, or at least 3 total people, show up in that lane, and this is bad for Tegveer. Because now without his tower, he has no safe place to stand, which means that if a rotation comes over from Grave, or heavens forbid Nayhoo, with how big he is, comes over to solo lane, Tegveer is just going to be dead.
Hapn, what are you doing here, bud? I think you're in the wrong jungle. You may be thinking this is the wrong game as well. Ratmilk was over here, but immediately that is called off. Pyromancer being looked at by the Sages. 7-0 as we break the 13.5-minute mark here. And Gold lead as well, pushing up fairly high. There's a big investment here in for Doug, but Doug's still living for now. Shippigami does answer it, but Pyromancer's gone. And the rest of the Athenian Sages, they're pushing down mid lane.
They are shoving it down and leaving their ADC to die, which is huge for the Xibalba Storm, because it means that Shippigami gets to get a little bit of solo farm over there uncontested. He does have Grave very nearby, so does end up having to back up there, but they finally bring down Doug for the first time this game and stop the snowball effect, and they're going to need to do something to cut the rest of the momentum that the Sages have here, because honestly, Blur, if I told you one of these teams was up 1-0 in this set, you'd probably assume with the way the Sages are playing that the previous game was just a cakewalk for them. Because that's kind of what it looks like here, as Grave is taking a 1v2.
Big fight for them, but they will bat out of hell to disengage because there is more follow-up here from Hapn. I don't think we've seen a single Stygian Torment come out from them, but even if they did go ahead and use it, Grave would have just blinked away anyway. Snaddy's over this side of the map after a teleport through. At least, at the very least, it is not a shutout. It's 7-1, but Xibalba Storm recognize, hey, they're starting to group up for objectives. They've got to do the same thing. But like you said, Tegveer still way too squishy for this engagement. And Snaddy, he's just running at people. He don't care.
Yeah, Sages should be able to grab this one for free. Doesn't look like anybody's too close, save for Hapn. It would be a miracle if he got it. Unfortunately, no miracle on any street here for the Xibalba Storm. And Hapn is going to pay for his transgressions here, Blur. And that's just, it's not a good fight for the Storm. They tried to fight on even footing there, but unfortunately, their even footing is like several steps down from where the Sages are at right now. As you mentioned, and as I brought up previously, Tegveer, one tier of one magical defense item is not going to be enough to allow you to frontline in front of 2 magical damage dealers. Both Nayhoo and DonutDoug could probably bring him down on their own if given the opportunity, if given the license to do so. And with the damage they're putting out on backliners, just think that's basically the same damage that Tegveer would experience if he were to step up and try to stand in front of either one of them. The Xibalba Storm are going to need some kind of stopgag very quickly here, Blur, because in the same way that the Storm looked for that early rotation to Fire Giant in Game 1, the Sages can do the same, and they're up significantly more in Game 2 than the Storm were.
They certainly are. I'm actually wondering whether or not at this point Achilles just says, yeah, I need to be tanky. Can we actually just hover over them as we do see Snaddy getting 2v1 chased at, but it's very little. I just want to see whether or not he is shirtless or has a breastplate on. He's still shirtless, I believe. Yes.
Put a shirt
still
on.
Gloriously bare-chested.
Put some clothes on.
It is getting kind of cold. You'd have thought he might go for it, but hello. You want to heat things up? What better than a fire giant to do so? Sages, they're starting this up 17 minutes in. Xibalba Storm, no, but they're not pulling the trigger to go in just yet.
And the fire giant is getting low. Here comes the Olorun ult.
It's there, and it is a secure for them. However, the rest of the team looking for an engagement here. Graves is very low, but Dogs will happily pick up Hapn. A nice taunt back on through, forces the Grand Joust from Ratmilk. But even so, the rest of the Sages are just barreling down this mid lane here. Good use of the beads will mean that the Riptide does not pull anyone back in, but that is a full-on retreat. Mid-Phoenix under duress here. And yes, that is Phoenix, I said. 17.5 minutes in. Shiπigami trying to get whatever farm they could on left. Cannot afford to base race this, because that mid-Phoenix is melting so quickly. In fact, so's Hapn. They're gone as well.
Storm have to go in here. They have to take this fight. If they let the Sages back up, things only get worse for them. But unfortunately, they don't feel confident enough to step forward. And as GIobe realizes this perhaps and attempts to chase them down, Sages are out like bandits in the night with the Fire Giant, with that middle bird, and now going for this Pyromancer Blur. I mean, this is... You want to talk about dire straits for the Storm? I don't think it gets much worse for you here 18 minutes into the game. As long as at least somebody on the Storm picks up that Pyro Bomb. Or excuse me, on the Sages. Holding my breath here. There you go.
Hey!
Good job. And as long as somebody grabs that bomb, Blur, that is probably one more Phoenix that will go down for free. Because when you're this far down, we're talking 12,000 gold at 18 minutes, which is nearly unthinkable at this stage of the game. You're not possessing relevant tools to fight into an Olorun. Like, the Sages can just walk their way up the left lane, have somebody push up the mid lane bird, and then just walk into left Phoenix with the Olorun. There is no way that the Xibalba Storm can possibly stop them from Olorun ulting and runic bombing the left Phoenix and just taking that one for free, which means that the Storm have to go for either the fight on the back end or try to ambush them in the jungle. You need to get a little desperate here if you're the Storm, because letting the map come to you is no longer going to be an option.
Yeah, if the map comes to you, the Athenian Sages are also there. And at this point, like you said, there is just no real shot that the Xibalba Storm can even so much as hope to defend here, as there is a more than 12,000 gold lead here in under 20 minutes. I think this is the highest gold lead I've seen come through in that short of a time frame. So we'll have to see if the Athenian Sages will be able to just burn this down. Snaddy leads the charge right through. That's enough time to get one of the runic bombs through. They'll go ahead and summon out the Ragnarok. It's all the ultimates going a-flying. No one on Xibalba Storm goes dying just yet. Hapn is the first to fall, as is GIobe. And now, as a result, Athenian Sages, they may just try and look to end here. Only Teague, Ratmilk, and Shiπigami up, but the River's Rebuke cuts off any kind of safety they have. This Titan is falling low. We may nearly see an under 20-minute game here. 20 on the dot!
Wow.
They take us to game 3.
Wow. Blur, I barely had time to put my shirt back on because I didn't think that game was going to be going down that quickly. But as you can see, I am shirted up, boat naked, by the way. I do think that it's just insane that they managed to make that kind of comeback. Usually a longer game like that, especially, I'm talking about game 1, by the way, a longer game like that where it feels like you're behind for the majority of the game. Teams play the game remarkably slow in the following game. You have to play a little bit more careful, make sure you don't make the same mistakes. But they shifted up the draft. They gave DonutDoug something that doesn't have to play second fiddle to what Shiπigami picks. And it's just night and day, the difference that made. As soon as DonutDoug got that first fight in his favor and they got one kill onto Ratmilk and gave that over to Grave, that was just the end of the game, it felt like. And I hate to say that the game's already decided just off of one engagement, but both of these games so far, it's felt like we have one 3v3 in dual lane, and that decides the fate of the entire remainder of the game.
Which is pretty impressive, considering I looked at the Olorun and I thought, okay, well, it doesn't really fight the Freya, but they can clear us effectively, and then like in their team fights are good, so... But no, they just say, no, I'm just going to gas this guy up, let him rip, and if nothing else, it kept Shiπigami from having a similar performance here. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head from the last side of things. Dual lane pressure is where it matters most. Game 3, one of these two teams will be coming away with a win for the first time in 4 weeks. Don't go anywhere. You do not want to miss this conclusion. 20 minutes on the dot. The Athenian Sages force this set to a game 3, Kaizo. Dual lane pressure pretty much exponentially ran the entire game. It was a shutout for more than half of the game. And by the time it ended, it just felt so difficult for the Xibalba Storm to even do anything in this. Do we look at, like, at this point, just all these magical ADCs go off the table? Or do you just barrel down and say both teams fight for this dominance?
Well, both teams did fight for it last game, and it ended up working out for the Sages, and I don't think that the Xibalba Storm were particularly fond of the way that the game played out for them. So I would think that if they get the opportunity to do so, you'd probably prefer to limit only one team to a magical ADC, ideally yourself in this situation. They do get their choice of first or second pick here, which does mean that if they only leave one on the table, if it's a sole Freya ban and Olorun's left up, or whatever combination you have, they do get the opportunity to pick up whatever is left over. So it is an option that they could go for. Very clearly, it worked for them very well when DonutDoug was on something a little bit more passive and they gave Shiπigami something that could just run down that lane. If you can reinstate that kind of situation, that's probably where you'd want to go for the Storm. But I think that the Sages are unlikely to go back to whatever happened in Game 1 after we saw the transformative performance for them in Game 2.
And picks and bans for game 3 already, so we will go ahead and get them underway. I am curious to know whether or not we'll see Xibalba Storm take that first pick, and they do go ahead and look to take first pick here. I think for me that's been one of the big ones. Like you mentioned, you can kind of get, like, forget how many good gods there are right now. You can get that throwaway ban or force Sages to ban certain things. I mean, last time we were seeing Hades bans from the Sages. We saw them full ban Soul and Set last time. If they get the luxury to do that, they leave open the door for some other fantastic picks available. But Storm, they go ahead and say, yeah, Freya, Olorun, how about no?
They do take away 2, which means Sages have to decide here, do you ban away the Soul, or do you allow Shiπigami to run that one again? I think that it's probably wise that we're finally playing a game without these magical ADCs, because Freya, Olorun, and Soul taken off the table. Honorable mention to Kronos, who, unfortunately, rest in peace, is not a real character in the current meta. You just straight up cannot pick that god. He is not good at doing what the other magical ADCs do. So it should finally be physical characters running the dual lane once more. Storm actually taking a good while here, Blur, before locking in the Athena, which is available only because so many magical ADCs got banned out. A lot of people are saying that Athena is the #1 support right now. You can see a lot of top pick and top ban for this character. And honestly, even outside of the support conversation, she might just be a top 5 god in the game across all roles right now, which is kind of insane to think about. So the Storm grabbed that one. Now the Sages have to decide what they're going to do on the back end.
Well, they will go back to the Raijin, who has had, I think, both ends of the pendulum in terms of a performance here. Game 1, couldn't do anything. Game 2, constantly putting out high amounts of damage. This Yemoja, very similar kind of a boat for them. So if it ain't broke, from last game's perspective, then you don't need to fix it. Whereas the Storm, they're going to go ahead and potentially look at this Thor pick and the Heimdallr. Now, Heimdallr is an ADC. It feels like it's designed to do that kind of, I just out pressure you early. Is with this Athena, is that potentially what they're looking for?
They have really good safety in this lane. I think that Athena Heimdallr is one of the harder dual lanes to crack. Heimdallr in particular lends to a lot of that. But as far as wave pressure for a physical ADC goes, Heimdallr is pretty elite in that conversation. I think of things like the Izanami might have a little bit better wave pressure. Something like an Ishtar might have better wave pressure. But you do get fight pressure from the Heimdallr at least, which the other 2 characters don't give you at least as much of. Or you have to trade out safety to get it in the case of the Ishtar. So it does pretty much everything right. We actually talked about this a little bit yesterday morning, me and Judas, on the EU side of things, where it was, I think, eChrome that was playing this one over there. And I think that it's a pick that could be on the rise here. The stocks might be going up for situations where either all the magical ADCs are banned out, or for whatever reason you don't want to pick them. I think that Heimdallr might actually be higher up in the conversation of priority picks for physical characters than people really seem to understand right now.
Well, you can see that Xibalba Storm really want to try and solidify some kind of strength over in that ADC role. I mean, 3 out of their 5 bans looking that way. They'll go ahead and take away the Hercules, which was also banned in the last game. But I was going to say, Anhur seems to be the go-to pick for a lot of these kind of hunters right now. It kind of foots the bill on if they're going to play aggressive. This is kind of the god I think of early game aggression outside of like Ho Yi, but it was the last time we saw that god picked in season 10.
Could not tell you, but this Anhur guy, this guy's pretty good because he doesn't do the wave push thing quite as well as something like the Heimdallr would. But as far as all-in fight potential, if you want to brawl to the death over a shield buff, Anhur's probably going to be your guy to do that. He has crazy damage output and the ability to fight over. What are you pointing at there, Blur? What do you got going on?
Oh no, I'm still going to point at that one there. I'm thinking, first of all, it was an Anubis, which I thought was going to get eaten alive. All right, well now it's a Zeus, which that feels like that's going to get eaten alive in the mid lane.
I think you might be right, but the thing is that GIobe is very comfortable piloting this character, and good Zeus players don't try to live through team fights, Blur. Good Zeus players just dump all of their damage out as often as possible and try to get it all off before they end up dying. And I think that GIobe definitely understands that mentality and knows that you're picking Zeus into a Yemoja, which will wall you in, a Raijin, which you can't avoid the damage of, Camazotz, which can jump up and go over the top of your damage. You're never living these engagements. Your job as GIobe playing Zeus here is get all your damage off so the rest of the team can win the fight after the fact. And the Sages are going to have to contend with that and try to play around in some way the fact that GIobe is going to be getting off all his damage one way or the other.
Let's see if they are able to do so. Either way, one of these teams will be crowned a victor here. A best of 3 turned best of 1. Let's go ahead and get on into the game for game 3 between these two teams. And I love the way that you said that with what GIobe is looking to do. GIobe is, for the longest time, I've always thought of, well, not GIobe, but Zeus. I always think of them as a streaker. They want to run into the middle of the field, get their kit off, and then try and live as long enough as they can before they get tackled by security.
Yeah, I do think that that's
kind of a comp.
It's a good analogy. I think that it fits pretty well because you really don't care about the consequences. You're only there to try your best and get the most enjoyment you can out of the little time that you have to do it. And I think that GIobe fits that bill pretty well here. But I do think, Blur, despite the fact that GIobe might be the most interesting or diverse pick that we see on the map, we should be shifting our attention back over here to the dual lane. And I feel like a broken record at this point for constantly talking, dual lane pressure, dual lane pressure, dual lane pressure. But both of these two games, the game has basically been decided over one fight in the dual lane. So I think that keeping your eyes here isn't the worst idea.
Not at all, but dual lane pressure has been going the way of most of these teams' fights. But GIobe very early on. No surprise to see Nayhoo go ahead and jump on in aggressively into that. I feel like you've kind of got level 2 to 3 is kind of the best time because Zeus has kind of been one of those gods who, over the years, has really been good at a couple of things. One of them being wave clear. Level 1, that shield does a surprisingly good job for wave clear.
It does, and it also gives you an actual relevant threat now because you can bounce the damage off it from the chain lightning, and if you have something like a Camazotz that wants to be on top of you, it means that they have to be significantly more careful about the way that they output that damage, because otherwise they might end up getting caught unawares and grave not the worst escape in the world, but the jump doesn't go too far that he couldn't be followed by Ratmilk on this Thor. And I do want to point out here, Blur, the dual lane pressure seems to be going the way of the Athenian Sages. Grave over on that side of the map, Ratmilk not attempting to contend with that this time around. Don't forget, we've seen a lot of fighting around this timestamp in this set, but instead it's going to be a much more passive beginning to this game, as instead of fighting over the shield buff, we're just going to split the map. One buff goes one way, the other buff goes the other.
And so far then, it's not really accruing too much of a gold lead, which I think is a good thing for both these two teams. If they end up with a situation where they kind of stall out these lanes, it will come down to the junglers. It's a good 2-man taunt there. They're trying to be scrappy right now, both these two. It's kind of a tug of war right now, this dual lane, as that's a lot of damage for DonutDoug.
It's a big tug.
That is indeed a big chunk of that. What is it? Is it Hafun's the name of the sword, I think, for Heimdallr? But
I want to say Horfuth, but I could be wrong
Horfuth?
about that. Whatever it's called, it's doing real good damage to DonutDoug, though. This guy is going to have to be significantly more careful, especially with that shield buff respawning fairly soon. Purple buff also due to spawn. Looks like an invade for the Xibalba Storm on both sides of the map, actually. They're going for blue and purple at the same time.
very interesting as well. But interesting there, Grave solo invades, whereas on the other side, Athenian Sages double split this. As again, both of these two teams looking to try and get scrappy with it. Good impale, but Hapn is really tanky right now until they just start continuing to eat those basic attacks. That early passive, that enfeeble, does so much as hello. I thought this was the solo lane. What's a 2v2 going on over here? Snaddy maybe in some trouble. The execute is there, and it is good enough. Tegveer picks up the second kill.
If Snaddy could get one footstep to the right there, he would have managed to live through that execute because he was separated by the wall. But despite the fact that there is a player-deployed structure between you and the Achilles, there is still a small amount of overlap where your player model's hurt box is still vulnerable while standing close to that wall. If you could get just on the other side of it and one step, then he gets caught on the wall. You don't actually get to connect the execute. But because Tegveer managed to get him while he was still directly on top of the wall, he does manage to land that execute. And that opens up that side of the map big time. Because don't forget, last game, this solo lane matchup, volatile basically until everybody rotated over to solo lane and just shut down Tegveer. So now that Snaddy is behind in this matchup, and they finally put Tegveer ahead on his favorite character, on his most rehearsed character, I think it does open the door for very suddenly this set could shift from dual lane pressure over to the Tegveer show, and everything could end up on this side of the map instead.
I'll have to keep an eye on for that one here. As just taking a look down on the builds, talk to me a little bit about this pick from Hapn here, the War Flag starter. Where's this one idea here?
The War Flag is mostly for, and this is going to shock you based on what we've been talking about, dual lane pressure. Because it gives you so much attack speed, it gives you the momentum and the movement speed to be able to do what you want. Snaddy he's dead to rights.
Oh, not
here.
again!
What a
So
fantastic crowd control combo there from Tegveer and Ratmilk. And that's the volatility of this matchup, man. Both of these characters want to get involved, want to hit the enemy and the wave at the same time. And you take so much damage for doing that, not only the wave pressure, but also trading out the enemy abilities. And Snaddy just doesn't have the resources required to not die to that CC chain. You can already get fairly close to killing him outright. So when you add the execute on top of that and give him a certain threshold and say, hey, if you're below this point, you're just dead, Ratmilk just straight up has the damage to get him to that point right now. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot else they can do other than let that kill drop away.
Right now, we do hear the Xibalba Storm. They've had a fairly good run on things as it stands, but whether or not Tegveer is able to transition this, so far it's been a lot of pressure over towards the solo lane, and given the fact that Snaddy had been able to push this out, the question I gotta ask then is, does Tegveer take this pressure and rotate early, or do you just use this? Or do you just use this to try and push us elsewhere?
I think that you can try to use the pressure early because, again, Snaddy in this matchup is basically dead to rights if you don't get some additional assistance over here. It just doesn't really facilitate an opportunity for you to get back in unless you get some outside assistance. If you get Grave over here on a good re-engage, understanding that more likely than not the Xibalba Storm are going to be trying to play around the solo side of the map, it could open up the window for you to at least take a fight where maybe the enemy's off balance, but if you just fight head-to-head up until this point, it's probably not going to pay out for you. Ratmilk is quite far ahead here because he's already got that Jotun's Wrath online. That means that either side lane could be under threat at any given moment, and there's not a whole lot the Athenian Sages can do other than potentially just have to ram their head into the wall and hope that something breaks loose. There are some very weak points in the Athenian Sages, or excuse me, in the Xibalba Storm draft, namely this Zeus, which we talked about a little bit previously, which you know you can land a reliable kill on. It's just a matter of how much damage you take as a result of it, what you have to sacrifice in order to open up that window and be able to jump through it. But if you can get that kill, then it's definitely going to be better for you.
Okay, well, as some of you may be able to notice, we're having a slight technical difficulties right now, but don't worry, we're going to go ahead and throw it to a quick break to try and get things sorted, and we'll be back shortly.
change the future, you know. That's what you remind me.
Welcome to your new sanctuary.
Apologies about the slightly longer delay on things. However, we are back on in with everything. We round the clock just a little bit so we can see back on some of the things we missed here. It is still just after Tegveer's second execute here. And the question I asked just before we went into the break was, Tegveer is very far ahead right now. Is this something that you keep pressing, or does Tegveer rotate and try and bring that elsewhere?
The thing about the way that Smite is played, you're not Judas, you're Blur. Blur is that
only a quarter.
When you're ahead like this, your answers to those kinds of questions are much more varied and come much easier. It's usually the team that's behind that has a more difficult time answering what are some of those questions that we might be asking. Like, for example, the Sages here, Snaddy's going to have to figure out some way to get back into this lane despite being 2 levels down. That is a much more difficult answer to come up with than Tegveer deciding, oh, do I continue to bully my lane opponent, or do I go bully somewhere else on the map? And it looks like, at least for the Xibalba Storm, they're going to invade some of these back camps, try to keep some of this solo lane pressure up. But for the Athenian Sages, the answer might be, well, we need to prevent ourselves from fighting around the solo side of the map. Let Tegveer do whatever he's going to do over here and try to cash in on some of the other points on the map. But instead, they're going to dump everything into Tegveer.
And it's not a bad look. He's the furthest one ahead right now. Ragnarok is being used, and with Nayhoo's follow-up as well, Snaddy finds a window and a foot in the door. They'll answer back a kill, close that level lead. I like the response from Tegveer there, where it was this idea of, I'm ahead, let's push out a little bit, put Grave behind. But unfortunately, the response from the Athenian Sages just said, yeah, no, you don't get to do that. As now, Athenian Sages answer back a little bit of this pressure. But it does seem like right now Hapn has opted to say, hey, Shippigami, you'll do fine on your own. I say that, look exactly, Hapn's actually making a beeline back. I thought he'd do that just because he had the ult. I thought he was going to be really smart, but no, he's making his way back over to the duo lane.
Not the worst idea, but at least real quick, Blair, I want to go back to why that didn't work out for Tegveer, though. Because it should be a good look to, if you're ahead, invade some of those back camps as a fed solo laner, but it's a byproduct of the mid lane matchup, actually, that ends up paying out the way that it did. Because Nayhoo has been standing on Globe's tower line this entire game, he was in the prime position to assist in that engagement. We'll see a fight here in Shippigami through the realms he goes, and we'll see what happens.
No beads. Oh, beautiful taunt on landing, hits both of them, and the Riptide actually works against Doug. But just about able to get away thanks to a pillar. I was going to say, Hámmy almost cost Doug their life in that there, but beautiful work. I love that two-man taunt, but dual lane pressure and presence. Feels like Shippigami has that one just a little bit more so right now. Mid lane seems to be spilling over, but look at this. Globe makes a rotation as well. There's no way they're looking for early Gold Furies. Instead, it might just be onto Grave, gets taunted in, and the ult hits nothing because the bat out of hell is there. Taiko drums, answer back on the Zeus juice, and they jump over the ult from Ratmilk. Grave may very well be a sacrificial lamb, but he's just out of range as well. No way,
Surely
reaches out of range as well, just on Mjolnir's attunement, and it'll end up as a double kill for Nayhoo.
Nayhoo is still fighting here, trying to burst down Hapn. Those mitigations will keep the Athena safe. Pretty good ability, that Defender of Olympus, as it turns out. Although, despite the fact that Storm were trying to play aggressive here, Blur, they end up losing a little more than they bargained for, and opening the door for the Athenian Sages, which is a much-needed bonus for them, considering the way that the map has been playing out so far. You have Nayhoo 2 levels ahead, but realistically, everywhere else is a little bit behind here for the Sages. They needed something to put in their coffers and give them an opportunity to catch back up a little bit on some of these individual matchups. DonutDoug down about a half level. So too is Snaddy in the solo lane as well. Grave about even pace with Ratmilk, but might be a little bit behind there also. So getting that's going to be pretty big for
Hámmy. Ooh, just about finds a little squeaking gap to squeak on by through there. But again, attempt for an invade, and even though they've got this pressure over on the duo lane, they still want to keep it going. Shield buff has respawned. Happens here. There's no way you can't know this is happening. River's Rebuke seems to have caught them off completely unawares. And even so, Happn's just getting completely body blocked here. The best CC is death, but second only to a body block.
Body block will do it, and, you know, River's Rebuke kind of helps there, but certainly the body block didn't hurt in that regard. And that's another thing for the Athenian Sages to put a check in their boxes for, a way to get back into this game. They were a couple thousand gold down, but after that fight in left, after a gold fury, and a pick on the support after the fact, suddenly they're not only back at parity, but the smallest inkling ahead of where they were originally. And that's a very big comeback for the early game. We're not talking thousands of gold swinging, but considering the fact that we are still 10 minutes in, getting from 1,500 back to even is crucial for them here, as Shichigami is proxy farming a wave, and I guess we'll just Bifrost on out of there. So credit to Heimdallr for being a quote-unquote unsafe ADC, as people used to call him. And that'll give him the opportunity for this beacon rotation here, Blur, and they're going to have plenty of members available for this fight.
Absolutely love that timing potential. The Taunt only on to the Yemoja right now, but like you said, with enough members here, they find just enough time to push everyone else from Athenian Sages away. And first Stygian Beacon, that is such a beautiful macro heads-up play there from the Shichigami, and a team fight as well. But DonutDoug now getting a lot of pressure in this duo lane. First Bastion down, second one shortly to follow.
That's no small amount of gold in his coffers either, and looks like we might have some action. Shichigami wanted that 1v1 real bad there, and went for the ult, and Ratmilk's going for an ult of his own. Hámmy is up a creek here.
Yoink, he's out. And
not.
That's the end of that one. Yeah,
He can swim.
I'm surprised that I thought the wall was going to come out from there, cut them off, but instead, Ratmilk says, it's fine, I was doing a weakened impression. Either way, 4-4 reads the scoreline there. Dead even here as we go 13 minutes into the game. I asked a lot of this in both the other games when it comes towards the later stages of the game. Zeus does feel pretty good late, but with how much damage is going to be available, does that kind of even it out?
It's going to be a very interesting game for this set in particular, because for the first time we're not going to have one fed magical ADC walking into these team fights and giving a substantial advantage to either one of these teams. And even at this point, Blur, we're getting to the point that Snaddy's mostly caught back up to Tegveer, because Tegveer's been rotating, been trying to impact the map, got shut down at that back camp invade, and that entire time Snaddy was just farming away contentedly in the solo lane. So that actually does mean that things are, for probably the first time this set, going to be pretty interesting once we get to some more of these neutral objectives. Pyromancer is due to spawn in just a minute or two. Oni Fury also ticking away and about to respawn on the left-hand side of the map. I'm going to give these teams an opportunity to break their way into this game when otherwise completely even for the first time. I feel like I've said that again, but I just really want to drive home the fact that all of these games up until this point have been mostly one-sided from the objective stage onward. And this time I feel like we're finally going to see a little bit more back and forth from these two teams. It was a stomp in either direction, and now because the game is so even, because there's no one lane that's super far ahead or one character that you can point to and say, hey, that guy's stronger at this stage of the game than his opposition, I think that these objectives are going to get a lot more interesting pretty quickly.
Well, you talk about getting interesting. Xibalba Storm just go ahead and say, hey, we don't care that you've got a vision on this. We've got the manpower right now. Dash Taunt. It's only onto Hámmy, and it's all poke right now. Big River's Rebuke. The Gold Fury is still being looked at, but with the Storm coming through as well, Hapn is the first to end up falling. Tegveer gets a double kill, though, on the duo lane. Now Nayhoo's being run down by this diving potential. The Fatal Strike is immune, but it will only buy them the briefest of window. 3 kills go the way of Xibalba Storm. A great work from Shichigami. Kicks Grave to the gray screen. but they traded out. It is a 3-for-4 right now, as it's just Snaddy versus the world. The last time Snaddy fought these two, it did not go so well. But a 3-for-4 bloodbath over here at 15 minutes in.
A little more interesting around these objectives, might you say, Blur, is for the first time, the objective doesn't go down, and we see an indecisive team fight, 3-for-4, as you mentioned. Although it is worth pointing out, Snaddy doesn't really get to that fight until it's basically over. So the fact that the Xibalba Storm don't manage to win that one more convincingly is a large credit to the rest of the Athenian Sages who were on the map at that time, because the excellent ult from Hámmy really slowed things down, and the re-engage after the Zeus ult came out was critical for the Sages there, because they don't get baited into that corridor, they don't take too much damage from that cooldown, and manage to back up and buy enough time for the rest of the Sages to get into position, because despite having the vision of the objective, they were still a little bit behind to turn up. So what could have been a really good opportunity from the Storm actually somehow plays out pretty even, and it's exclusively because the Sages got the better end of that engagement, even despite being a man down. Tegveer was there very early on, doesn't make a game-shattering impact on that team fight, even though it was a pretty good impact, I would argue. Gets a couple of kills there and makes sure that they can't successfully complete that Gold Fury on their own. I'm so excited for the rest of this game, man. It's real Smite for the first time this set.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. Both of these two teams, they're sat 0-3 down the bottom of the leaderboard. Unlikely that either of these two teams are going to be able to go ahead and grab themselves a spot towards looking at Worlds. But at the same time, if you've got nothing to lose, you can do this kind of situation where it's just, we are going to play lights out and just go for it, because what are you waiting for? I mean, look at that. They just go in, knock Hámmy down to 70%, and then follow it up again because Tegveer's rotation locks out the execute.
You can see why this guy plays so much Achilles, man. He looks so good on this god, and granted, it's easy to look good when you're as far ahead as he was early on, but even now that we're back to parity as mentioned previously, he's continuing to terrorize the front line of the Athenian Sages. And now they have a little bit of a power play here with Hámmy dead. Another 5 seconds or so that they could look at the Zoni Fury. Zeus ult is available, as are most of the other cooldowns for the Storm. It's going to start with the taunt onto Snaddy, but not going to be able to kill him just yet. Doug uses beads, Snaddy uses beads. This is a great opportunity for the Storm.
Possibly, but even so, Xibalba Storm are taking this a little slower than I think they'd like. Nayhoo goes ahead and pushes those minions into tower. They'll grab themselves a tier 1 with the Sages, but Snaddy goes up, and the objective is leash. Now Thor looking for an engagement here, but look at what's happening to Hapn. Hapn is dead. Dunk falls in retribution to Ratmilk, but even so, Tegveer is having to put in a lot of work to answer this back. It is another set of 1-for-1 for 1-for-1. All in all, 2 members on each side go down. Fury still stands.
And Ratmilk dies there, but he is the saving grace of that team fight for the Xibalba Storm, because that engage that the Athenian Sages got after the Storm took so much damage was absolutely immaculate. But Ratmilk lands on 3, if not 4 people, and manages to dissuade the rest of that team fight and prevent it from going pretty substantially in the opposite direction. Storm, though, with enough people to at least take down this Gold Fury with the help of the Athena ult, we'll go ahead and grab that. Looks like Pyromancer was done on the other side of the map.
I don't know who by.
It's got to be the Sages, based on the fact that they got out of there pretty quickly. Looks like Hámmy, here we go, he's going to step back up and take the bomb and
it is.
Notify us that it was, in fact, the Sages that grabbed that. So fight goes even again, Blur. The Gold Fury goes one way, the Pyromancer goes the other way, and still we're waiting for one of these teams to break away from the other.
I mean, look at that. Look at that single jagged dip straight down. That is Fury Pyromancer straight after the other. We can start seeing some of these builds come online. Notably, for my money, Shippigami got some penetration, some percent pen. They finally have their dominance online. DonutDoug has had that Executioner's second item already. But the Atalanta's bow here, this is one that's been kind of flirted with a little bit. We've seen some Hachiman pick it up in the SPL. What's the idea behind this?
it's got penetration, specifically it's got flat penetration, and it allows you to snowball some of these team fights a little bit more effectively. In compositions like the Xibalba Storm, where you're focused on killing a frontliner, you're all in on, you use Athena taunt and you use execute, and then a frontliner is hypothetically dead after all of that is gone. The Xibalba Storm are on the momentum for the rest of that team fight. And an item like Atalanta's Bow that as soon as you get a kill or assist, gives you that movement speed, gives you that attack speed, makes it a little bit easier to snowball one pick into a meaningful and successful fight for you. So it's not a every single game you want to pick this up kind of item, but it's according to your composition. Are you killing frontliners? Are you killing backliners? Do you have a reliable kill that you can land? If yes, then it's pretty good.
Well, the thing that answers the question, if yes, Hámmy again just dumpster dove here. Every time Hapn gets a taunt, GIobe is following up with huge swathes of damage. Snaddy makes a rotation on over to try and again set up towards a beacon, but just pushing everyone out, actually ults away defensively.
And this is getting unusually dire for the Athenian Sages. Not in the macro perspective, because I feel like I've said this a couple times now, but the game is fairly even, Blur. The problem that I'm noticing is that Hámmy is getting picked a lot at the beginning of these team fights. And it is a very difficult matchup for...
Whoa!
Just killed a guy. Nayhoo used beads, jumped away, didn't Dagus, and just dies there. Tower also goes down. But Hámmy's going to have to play more carefully. He's got a full aura build designed to keep his backline safe. But because of that, because we have no beads, no spirit robe, nothing selfish to keep him alive, they're picking him non-stop at the start of these fights. So either the Sages need to cash in on all of the investment that the Storm are using to bring down the support in the same way that Zeus gets his damage off knowing he's going to die. The Sages need to take these fights knowing that their support is getting executed more likely than not. Or Hámmy has to find some way to position more safely in these fights, maybe build more selfishly, more defensively in the following items. I mean, whatever the case may be, they're going to have to keep Hámmy safer or do something once he dies, because it seems at this point like Hámmy dying is just an inevitability in a lot of these engagements.
Well, given the build path that we are seeing, I would not be surprised at, which is weird because look at Hapn. Hapn has literally just 2 defense items. You'd look at an Athena who's got 2 defense items and I'm thinking, oh my god, they're so far behind, they're getting picked off, they're so easy to kill, but at the same time, upgraded Sunder, upgraded Shell, well, both of these 2 supports have that option to them. Now with the War Flag as well, it just was like Hapn doesn't seem to need to worry about the damage output.
No, because they're always on the front foot. That what makes Athena so strong as the taunt comes in. Nayhoo taunted back, Ratmilk going in.
Whoa, Hámmy just deleting health bars right now. Ratmilk not able to find the kill, but Tegveer will do so. Now going to chase down a little bit further. But meanwhile, on the back line, the blink is there. Straight on in to a stun. Let's GIobe pick up the kill. A 1-for-2 trade out as GIobe makes it through every one of these engagements. It doesn't matter how many people happen taunts. A fight is happening afterwards. And now the name makes sense. GIobe is always there, and this damage output is just disgusting. Tegveer teleports in as Primal Fury is being looked at by Xibalba Storm. Snaddy charge headfirst towards GIobe, dissuaded slightly by a taunt, but it's not there. GIobe has to disengage, but it's being chased out a lot by the Ragnarok. But Snaddy actually goes ahead and dips because Tegveer was dealing with the rest of the team.
Yeah, GIobe has both relics there and a support beside him means that Snaddy probably doesn't land that kill and can't afford to die potentially as a result of it. So probably wise that he backs up there. But if you want to talk about why Hapn is managing to survive despite having, as you call it out, 2.5 or 3 defense items, it's because Athena plays exclusively on the front foot in engagements. You're always dashing in and taunting, and that's how the engagement starts. More often than not, the way that supports die is unexpectedly getting picked. Hang on, something unexpected on the map here, Blur, is this fire giant. The Sages are here.
It's going. It's going. Zeus ult down already. Just trying to keep everyone off. The taunt is there, and it's huge again from Hapn. The entire team gets this fire giant. Tegveer may be a sacrificial lamb for the rest of the team. But considering Ratmilk was also incredibly low, this front line is just letting everything happen, but just Athenian Sages, they're going to chase this one down further. River's Rebuke does not catch anyone, unfortunately there, but Graves bad out of hell. From close distance, but there's not enough damage to follow it up. Hapn, very low, but a 3-man taunt slows it down so much. In fact, actually, it allows Shiπigami to get a kill, and DonutDoug gets taken down on the left side. What is happening here, Kaizo?
They were trying so hard, were the Athenian Sages, to chase that one down. As actually Nayhoo jumps back in here on Shiπigami. More help comes from the skies as Snaddy lands from being through the realm. Shiπigami, left by himself, will be taken down. And all of that comes, Blur, from the fact that the Athenian Sages had their Titan pushing down the left-hand side of the map and were trying to stall for time because the entirety of that fight, DonutDoug was walking it down, trying to get that bird alongside the Titan, and the Sages didn't have to win that fight. They just had to stop members from backing. As we'll see on the screen here, Nayhoo gets executed. The Sages only had to stop the backs of the Xibalba Storm, and DonutDoug will hold hands with the Titan and bring down that left bird. But because they barely didn't make it to one member backing on the Xibalba Storm, I believe it was Shiπigami that actually successfully resolved that back and made it to the left lane. The Xibalba Storm somehow cling on to a 1 HP Phoenix, shutting down that last resort play from the Athenian Sages and preventing them from getting that bird on left. Now, that does mean that the Xibalba Storm have to regroup here and make use of the Fire Giant that they just earned, but it looks like the game is slowing down a bit. They're taking that deep breath. Everybody's regrouping, and the scrambling stage of the game is over. And now the Xibalba Storm should be resorting once again to this structured play that we've seen from them so far and pushing up this FG and trying to break down some of these towers.
Keep an eye on where they decide to look towards that. Grave taken down to needing to use the ultimate already. Not taken down particularly low, but just the threat. Because every time Hapn shows up, it's one of those things. Athena feels as dangerous as the rest of the comp is dangerous. And there is a Zeus that is 3, 2, and 7 and pretty much full build at this point. That is a very deadly Athena if Zeus is anywhere nearby.
Or anybody else at this point, because don't forget that if you get taunted and then end up just a little bit low, Tegveer's going to be there and make sure that you feel that fatal strike and maybe hit you in the back of the heel. And the Xibalba Storm are pushing down this left lane, Blur. It looks like Grave is going to be on split push duty. And his job here is either to answer the bird back or make somebody reset. Looks like they do get Tegveer to back, so it'll be a 4v4 on the left. A 1v1 on the left as well. Grave blinks in. Bomb here. I think he gets it.
Stun is actually good enough. Doesn't have beads. Uses them late. And the Phoenix still stands. Tegveer gets to hold the base for the team. And now with a ward following up, Hapn is just throwing out Sunders and Taunts as best they can. There's follow-up coming through. And it's just clipping Nayhoo with the ult from the Amble of Dawn.
And if that wall was a half a second later from Ratmilk, that would have been a kill onto Nayhoo. But now no beads means this could be bad.
It's gonna be very bad. Shiπigami takes down Hámmy before the execute's even used. Tegveer just using that to pile drive their face into the rest of the Athenian Sages team. Snaddy is up and goes straight back down. The extra minions will be useful as Ratmilk is a little bit far forward on their own. And this Phoenix has taken absolutely no damage because everyone else on the team is taking damage. Doug is down low and has to disengage. And it's all because Globe has been able to free cast this entire fight.
Globe drops the lightning storm there, not for the damage, but for the space creation. And after a messy engagement, the Xibalba Storm do successfully bring down that left bird. They actually used a runic bomb there. It didn't quite get to the Phoenix, so a little bit of expenditure that they didn't get a return on, but they certainly do break the base either way. And the Sages have played this incredibly tight the entire time. I mean, we're talking Grave somehow almost getting that bird, but not breaking that one open for the second time so far this game. They really want that dual lane bird, do the Athenian Sages, and now twice they've gotten it to 1 HP and haven't been able to get that return. I think if either Grave or DonutDoug can successfully bring that bird down, we might be looking at pretty different game state here, but because the Xibalba Storm do manage to grab the FG and grab a left bird of their own, It makes the Sage's job a whole lot harder. Game is even in gold, but map state favors the Xibalba Storm here, Blur, as we're talking Fire Giant again, and this time the enhanced variant as we tick over that 30-minute mark. It's going to be a very critical fight here and could end up deciding the game.
Teague teleporting in around the side. Athenian Sages will know this, and they're just trying to use that HP heal that they've got with a little bit of shielding from Yemoja. Try and keep themselves topped up here, but Snaddy sitting about 60%. All ults available, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see them go in to try and stop this Fire Giant. Ragnarok, first one used, looking to just dive into the pit, and they push everyone from Xibalba Storm off. Graves around the side as well, looking to answer it back. Just right into the backline with Thor with a 4-man stun. He picks up one, but is answered back immediately. Now the rest of the Athenian Sages trying to turn tail. GIobe beats Aegis out Doug's damage. It's a good look for them. It's a 1-for-1 trade. Fire Giant held off. The Titan is going to start taking some damage here. The Athenian Sages have to be careful, but they're not just going in for the fight. This is an all-or-nothing play. The Athenian Sages can't find damage enough. Oh, Hapn.
Doug is slamming these autos, man, into the back of Hapn's head, and that is some no small damage that he's doing as a result of it, so that will at least deter the Xibalba Storm there. And they get what should have been, or at least could have been, a more substantial fight there. Ratmilk manages to find Nayhoo with the ult when Beads and Aegis were still unavailable for the Raijin, so that was a pretty clean kill. But fortunately for the Athenian Sages, the space created by Snaddy and Grave there was enough that nobody was capable of stepping up to punish him for doing that. Snaddy will burn the ultimate here and have to get on out of dodge. That could be a window here, Blur, for the Storm to grab this FG. They are going to pull it, but check out this flank that Grave is going for here on the left-hand side.
Possibly, but they didn't invest anything to get that from Snaddy. It was just basic attacks. Shinigami's damage is absolutely insane right now. I think there was 509 a basic on this Fire Giant, because this build is just pure penetration. Nobody can stand up to them, and this bird on the right-hand side for the Athenian Sages, left-hand side for the map, it's still a thing that's underpinning all the Sages' aggression. It doesn't matter if they win these fights, because they've got to be careful that Titan doesn't get too weak.
And this next minute or so, call it 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds for the Xibalba Storm is going to be very critical, because that's when this left-hand bird is going to respawn. And of course, the minion damage on Titan, if you have fire creep waves going down that side of the map, can feel very impactful, but it's more important to fight when this bird is not down, but instead respawning. Just a couple of seconds here. That's why they're so far forward in this pit. They know that if they get Snaddy a little bit too far forward trying to clear these waves, then they have the opportunity to take the fight. Or if they can manage to take it before he gets over here, he has teleport available, but he's got to get here somehow.
He's finding a way, by the looks of it. No, he's actually still over in the left-hand side. The Xibalba Storm, though, all 5 members are around. Keep an eye on Grave. Looking for that flank. They find GIobe immediately. Throws straight in, but I think they thought they'd do a little bit more damage than they do, because that was just a blink straight into bat out of hell. GIobe did not panic at all.
GIobe manages to hang on to both. Well, he didn't have both relics, so didn't actually get the chance to use them, even if he wanted to. Those are up in just a couple of seconds here. And that blink in from Grave does buy some time for the Sages to get those waves pushed out in the left. They now no longer have to worry about the fire waves on left, which means Snaddy is allowed to take these fights again. And the Storm know that they're coming from base. They got to get in here soon because they're already up. Sages got to respond.
Let's see what ends up happening here. Sages need to try and hold on to this Fire Giant or take it away from everyone. Nice huge taunt. Puts DonutDoug in a lot of damage, but the damage is immune. So Ratmilk comes in from the back line, takes down Doug. Falls in response to Nayhoo, but GIobe fires off the ultimate, picks up Hámmy. It's 2-for-1 so far. Health bars are low. The Athenian Sages, I don't know if they can keep this going. Nayhoo, though, says, I'll give it a damn good try. A triple kill for the mid lane of the Athenian Sages, and be damned with the Fire Giant. They might just look to try and end, but unfortunately, waves are pushed just too far up. Athenian Sages will have to cut their losses and push up somewhere else.
Blur, I don't know what to even say about the Xibalba Storm team fights, because I don't know what they can be doing differently, really, here. Ratmilk finds a dunk onto 3 people with no beads that just got taunted to force those beads, and yet somehow, by some stretch of the imagination, the Athenian Sages managed to cling to dear life in those engagements and somehow keep Nayhoo alive through all of that. I don't know how this guy's living through these team fights. He must be like coated in grease or baby oil or something, because he's barely managing to slip his way out of every single fight and then waterfall back in the opposite direction. It's been Nayhoo every single time answering the initial contest from the Xibalba Storm, and they're gonna have to get some kind of help for the Storm with the dive that Ratmilk has got going on. Tegveer, unfortunately, there gets walled off not only by the River's Rebuke, but also that tectonic rift from Ratmilk manages to keep him away from the rest of that fight. I think that if Tegveer is in that engagement a little deeper and on the other side of that wall, this could be a game that's over in favor of the Xibalba Storm. But that micro change in the positioning where he was just a couple inches too far to the side means that no help was there for Ratmilk. They managed to shut him down and then move forward with the fight after the fact. But now it's a relic graveyard.
Look at left.
Which means that anytime we have these fights around these Athena taunts, everybody's got to be so much more careful. Only beads available for Snaddy for the time being, which means that the Xibalba Storm could look for something. But as you mentioned, Grave does have a Oni wave here on the left lane. Looks like Tegveer is for the defense, but can they get it the third time, Blair?
He's got a bomb. He should have the minion damage this time because Tegveer gets knocked up. Now it's a 4v4 on the Fire Giant. Pippa Grave is just going to beeline back towards it. Xibalba Storm now find themselves on the back foot. Tegveer will teleport in, so we'll be there first. But the Sages have just backed themselves up. And I just want to point out, first of all, because it's really, really nice. Almost. 3-3-3-1-3. Damage from Nayhoo. It's mid lane mage madness right now for the damage. It is just melting health bars. So Shipigami seems to be focused first, but they'll disengage. It's actually Xibalba Storm on the return and running away. Globe, force low, River's Rebuke. Doesn't do much. They're chasing out this Zeus as hard as they can, and they will grab it. It's a big investment, but no one's health bars is that much lower off for it. Now body blocking with a fantastic pillar from Doug. Forces Fatal Strike in an awkward spot. Knockup is there, following up more damage. Athenian Sages have just ripped this game open. A double kill for Grave. Fire Giant in tow around their waist, soon to be. And a left side Phoenix already gone, 37.5 minutes in. Sages are looking to close this game out with this fire.
And the Storm are just a little bit too trepidatious in that engagement. They knew that they had Snaddy significantly sooner than the Sages were going to have Grave. But instead, they were pretty far back. I mean, I don't know if they were afraid of ward coverage potentially not being in their favor or walking into some potential Raijin damage when they're not expecting it, but they just didn't play when they had the power play, when they had the man advantage, and because of that, the Sages are just walking them down.
Look at this. No fear at all. Hapn will just about get away, but Riptide put them very low. Taiko Drums comes out, taunts back Shippigami, burns the beads, and with that space created, Athenian Sages, they'll go ahead and just swipe away the right side Phoenix as well. Looking to try and break
they could go
the
for
base
it
now. They just need some minions in. Like you said, they might just be able to go for it. Shippigami gets the Athena ult. They'll push everyone away. Ratmilk goes in alone, gets a big taunt, big stun, big CC to save the game. But is it enough? Doug falls, takes them out in exchange for Hámmy. The health bars are lower. Sages on retreat with this Fire Giant, but the damage may already be done.
Yeah, damage more than done here for the Athenian Sages, and this is going to make the job of the Xibalba Storm significantly harder for the next 2.5 to 3 minutes until they can at least get one of these birds back up, because 3 Phoenixes down is next to impossible to defend, especially with your Titan already half HP. It will not be regenerating any of that HP unless the Athenian Sages step in and try to volunteer some assistance. Which means that the Storm kind of have to fight outside of the base here, Blur. If they let Nayhoo get too close, if they let Grave blink in and get the bat out of hell off, if they let Snaddy drop the ultimate like the Predator missile he is and land on that Titan, might just be too much damage for them to do anything about. We're getting very close to the threshold of screw it, we're just going to go all in and hope that it works out for us. No fight may even be needed for the Athenian Sages if the Xibalba Storm don't force them to fight on the way into the base. The critical thing for the blue squad here is they need to get ward coverage around the jungle at each of these choke points to walk into the jungle or into one of these lanes and know where the Sages are at all times. If you get caught unawares by 1, 2, maybe 3 members would be all it takes, your Titan's just dead before you can respond to it. So you can see they got those sentry wards down, pings coming out on the left side Phoenix. They know that this is going to be a very critical moment. Look where they're positioned, Blur. So far forward and out of their base. No Phoenixes to stand under, no help from the structures, but they understand the assignment. You cannot allow the Athenian Sages to get penetration into the throne room. All of this fight may have to happen on this left Phoenix.
Might just be that way. Athenian Sages, they've got a little bit of damage they need to do here. They just can't get in. Taunt just off the mark from Hapn, but even so, Athenian Sages know, like you said, they can play this slower. They've got pressure mounting in all 3 lanes. Nice 2-man taunt, and DonutDoug is just deleted immediately. And the Athenian Sages just turn tail and run from the left-hand side, but again, it's not that big of a loss for them because they've still got pressure in these other 2 lanes. Ratmilk goes up.
Wow.
Titan falls to about half. But Sages, they seem shell-shocked from that. They're like, whoa. Okay, let's, fire, guys, I guess?
And then somebody's going to have to tell them that fire is not spawning, which means that they kind of have their hands behind their back and not a whole lot to do until DonutDoug respawns. And I do want to point out, Blur, both relics available for DonutDoug there and ultimate available after he dies. And I don't know if maybe a half-second cooldown before those were back up, but whatever the case may be, I don't think that you can afford to go down without a fight at 41 minutes into the game when you're sieging for the end. I feel like if Hapn is dash taunting you as DonutDoug there, you got to use beads, Aegis, ult, something, jump away, whatever it is, to make sure you don't get caught, because that was the one play that the Xibalba Storm had to get back into this game. If that fight doesn't work out for them, it's game over. Sages literally just walk into base and end the game. So they give them the one opportunity that they had for the Xibalba Storm. Now all these Phoenixes are back up. I mean, you got the left already pushed out. No more fire waves coming from that direction. Mid lane Bird has respawned. So too has the right side. A couple more waves left to deal with for each of those. And with 15 seconds on Fire Giant, they might have time to get up and make a defense on this pit. They're going to have to do so into a whole lot of red ward coverage. But for the first time in several minutes, the game is not hanging in the balance for the Xibalba Storm. They can potentially look to make their mark here and try to fight their way back in.
Keep close attention to these Phoenixes. I don't think that anyone in the Athenian Sages will try for a sneaky steal of those. This Fire Giant dance, more so to try and fight an intrepid battle here. As members from Xibalba Storm go in. Rivers Rebuke used early. But where's the damage output? Because right now Hammy's very low. Meanwhile, in the backside, Grave eats a lot of damage. But Tegveer's being deleted by Nayhoo again. You mentioned that you don't know what he's been covered in. I'm saying Invisible Link because no one seems to be noticing him.
He does have a lot of health to work with here, actually. I was looking at the wrong health bar. Hapn, however, is low, does get bursted. CC chain will not kill him. But all this time, Blair, Fire Giant being done by the Athenian Sages. Xibalba Storm look like they want to walk up.
They might try, but even so, they just end up falling if they did. So Fire Giant goes the way of Athenian Sages on all members again. If they really feel like it, they could go and grab themselves an Oni Fury to try and help siege this out. But recognizing these Phoenixes are low, they don't want to do it. But the Storm held once in a situation worse than this. Can they do it again?
Beads and Aegis available for both ADCs, but not a whole lot of other people will have that luxury. See Athenian Sages walk into the middle. Bird Hapn gets a taunt, but there is no help.
Stun. Not quite on the mark as Grave takes down the left side Phoenix as well. Snaddy might just go ahead and barrel on down the right-hand side themselves. They'll go ahead and start trying for a potential fight, but even so, Hapn's health is just so, or shield is so useful for the rest of them. They are able to keep everyone topped up nicely. And they'll just reset for this next Phoenix here. Now, it's all 5 members still up. Executes are a threat, but I don't think we've been able to see Tegveer go for an execute since about 15 minutes ago. Hapn gets a taunt here, and it's a ridiculous amount of damage.
Okay.
Goodbye, Hámmy. Is that just shut it up completely there? Because the Athenian
guess.
Sages are backing up. What? What is this game, Kaizo?
You don't need an execute blur if your backliners are doing execute level damage, and one taunt is all that is required to bring down Hámmy. And I mentioned before that it seems to be the game plan of the Xibalba Storm to just pick Hámmy at the beginning of each of these engagements and then not have to deal with a team that has an enemy support. And it's worked out pretty well for them so far. Both of the dual lane of the Athenian Sages have been caught at least once each in this late game stage of the game with their
double
I don't want to say their pants down, but they seem to be relatively unawares, Blur, because now Hámmy got caught, Doug got caught on left, and what was a really scary opportunity for the Sages to potentially walk it down and end the game is now 20 more seconds plus the time required for the support to walk back from base before they can even make anything happen in this game and try to contend with what they have going on for the Xibalba Storm. It is worth mentioning, though, they have the Fire Waves in left, Fire Waves in mid still as well, and Oni Fury just done for the Athenian Sages as well means that those minions by themselves, if the fight... Let's draw a hypothetical scenario here, Blur. If all 10 members on the map just die instantaneously to some extraterrestrial activity, the Athenian Sages win this game. Those Oni Fire Waves are sufficient to completely bring down that Titan. However, now we have both Titans out of the throne room, walking it down the right lane. Fire Waves are going to be standing in the base of the Xibalba Storm if their Titan goes back. This is crazy town, Blur. This is insanity.
No way. I feel like Xibalba Storm can't even let their Titan die out of base.
They can't.
4 waves of fire minions are going to come in. That's just going to delete it immediately. This is an absolute insanity potential here. Xibalba Storm are going to have to pull out some kind of a miracle play here. And it's not even over a fire giant. It's not even over much. It's just Titans sparring and the rest of the team going at it as well. Shells popped. Nayhoo goes for a very early ultimate for the CC immunity, but Hapn just about gets away with the CC immunity, but it's not enough. The tick damage from Nayhoo is there. Ratmilk, Tegan going on in the backline, but they can't land home. Grave buries another one. Make it a double for them. Titan still getting taken down. Globe and Shinigami will run back to base to try and defend the... But look at this. The Titan is there. I don't think they're going to get back in time for the second time this week here in Phase 2, Week 4. Minions win the game, and Xibalba Storm, unfortunately, cannot hold on any longer. The Athenian Sages find their first win.
Looking, an Oni Fire Wave somehow got caught in front of the gate in right lane. Didn't even need to be in the throne room there because there were so many stacked up. You don't see a whole lot of games where the game is decided on whether or not the Titan is banished back to his throne room for his certain demise if anybody's not there to defend him. But the Athenian Sages managed to win one of the most insane games of Smite I've ever had the pleasure to watch, Blur. That is a insane... I've used insane, crazy... What other words can I use to describe the situation that we had there at the end? I don't even know if there was a situation where the Xibalba Storm, even if they win that fight and their Titan dies in right lane, I think they still lose that game somehow. They could 5-0 there, and if they don't win off that push, I'm pretty sure that the Sages had the table set to win that game. And we wanted something less stompy. It was 2 snowballs in a row. I wanted an interesting game. I wanted a longer game. I wanted a balanced game. I got more than I asked for in this set, Blur.
You certainly did. Credit to whoever wrote the script and finale for this matchup. What a... Like, you look at these two teams, and you'd mentioned it. They'd not had the best of showings here. I think, for what it's worth, this has been a fantastic look for both of these two teams, but it's all shoulda, coulda, wouldas for the Xibalba Storm. Congratulations, Athenian Sages. You will go ahead and earn your first victory here in week number 4 of Phase 2 of the SCC. But unfortunately, that is it from everyone here. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much, Kaizo, for being my chair too and giving me all the smart information. Thank you very much to Rosie over on Spectator side of things and Phoenix, our producer, to whom without we would not have a broadcast at all. And of course, to everyone who is watching this. But for now, I have been Supersonic Blur. You nerds have been a fantastic audience, and we'll see you all next time.